One of the most fearsome beings ever discovered by the SCP Foundation is the Scarlet King. Ancient, evil, hatred personified. He is unknowable and infinitely terrifying all at once. And just as the Foundation uncovered his existence, they also discovered the Davites, his worshippers, working tirelessly to place the Scarlet King upon his throne once more, and plunge the world into an eternity of darkness and destruction. The Foundation and its allies, forces all across the universes and beyond, fought valiantly to prevent the return of this beast, but pure evil can only be beaten back for so long. Nothing lasts forever, and peace least of all. And so it was that the Chronicle of the Devas was uncovered once more, the Davites crawling back out of the shadows of history. They raised armies to fight for the mission of the Scarlet King, calling out to him in worship. Much to the horror of all other living things, he answered. The Scarlet Kit emerged from the pit of Megiddo, joined by his Leviathans, his demon lords. The Davites had what they so dearly wanted, the destruction of all things. The modern world had had a good enough run. Now it was time for the dawn of a new era, one of darkness and blood, putrefaction of life, and the extinction of all creation. But if there was one thing that humanity, brilliant, beautiful cockroaches of the multiverse that they are, is capable of, it is survival. Mankind refused to back down in the face of certain annihilation, staring down the Scarlet King. No, they would not go quietly into that good dark night. And they were not alone in the battle either. She who made knowledge, she who made the mind, the one at times known as the Broken God, emerged to join the fight. Once shattered by a servant of the Scarlet King, she emerged unbroken once more, accompanied by her army of dreadnought angels. There were so many that their beating of their wings changed the direction of the wind, and their army blotted out the very sky itself. Nahash, the serpent, protector of the Tree of Knowledge and creator of the Wanderer's Library, once exiled, returned to reunite with his sister to fight side by side with humanity against the Scarlet King. Amidst the reemergence of these powers, once forgotten and cast out, an unlikely ally emerged to come to humanity's aid to take up arms against the king. Three brothers clad in black, hailing from a land beyond the Tree of Knowledge, beyond the library, beyond Alagada, small death, the weakest and the youngest, great death, the death of every finite quantity, and all death, the destruction of all things, and the oldest being in all of creation, rode astride their white horses. At their command, the doors of the silent halls opened, and outstreamed an infinite army of every being that had ever died. The army swarmed to the court of the king, freeing his 6 remaining brides, and all who were imprisoned there. The first of the 6 brides that still remained in the halls of the Scarlet King were Ativik, beloved of the king and the bearer of wise children, children who knew the ways of war. Her seal was Vaduk, or dominion. The second was Aghor, always hungry, always longing, always gripped by despair. Not her children, nor the king, could ever hope to give her what she desired, and so she wept. The third was Adistat, who destroyed all she surveyed, hating her sisters and wiping the world bare around her. The fourth was the powerful, terrible Azib, bound by hate and invulnerable to all harm. The fifth was Anu, strong in mind but frail in body. She and her children were wise, talented in magic, but hobbled by the king, ever thirsting for power they could not achieve. The sixth was Atilif, the silent bride, who kept to the shadows and remained hidden there. Once there had been a 7th bride, but she was no longer in those silent halls. She would play a different role in this grand war. The brothers' death led their army, every soul that once lived and now walked in death, mortal and god alike, from every world both here and beyond. From the ghastly army, a song of hope and joy rose up into the air. For once, the dead and the living fought on the same side, with one aim: to dethrone the king. And so, with these forces gathered and pointed toward their one shared foe, it was time for the ultimate battle to commence. Gods descended down from the heavens and rose up from the pit and went to war. The earth was scarred beyond recognition in the battle. The library was burned to the ground like the Library of Alexandria 1,000 times over. Creation itself was destroyed, as an untold number of lives were cut short. Rivers of blood spilled for the sake of a seemingly fruitless fight. The Scarlet King settled onto his throne in God's blind spot, and all of creation across worlds and worlds was nothing but ruin. The two sons of Adam, Cain and Abel, met in battle one more time beneath the mountain. They died by each other's hands. The Scarlet King grasped the serpent Nahash in his hands and tore it into 2 pieces. The broken god was shattered once more. The stars began to blink out one by one as even the army of the dead crumbled to dust once more. It was all over, an infinite stretch of eternal darkness, except for one glimmer of light in the depths of the dark. 36 saints gathered together on a mountain slope. They fulfilled their destiny, and though they could not save the world, they could weaken the king, could break the seals he had placed on himself to render himself invulnerable. They could make him more like a man, something that could be killed. 7 warriors were chosen to defeat the king, to bring his empire of ruin to a stop, even if the destruction could never be undone. Each of them bore a spear that could pierce the king, if only the warrior struck true. First, there was the bastard Empress of Antarctica, once found in SCP-1483, clad in a veil and unable to speak. Second, there was M.K. Harker, founder of the Shark Punching Center. The third warrior was the Exile, the old man from nowhere, who once cheated the brothers' death at a game of cards, winning against them at the cost of everything that had once made life worth living. The fourth warrior was once the 7th bride of the Scarlet King, Ahabat. Once she was the smallest and the weakest of his brides, at least physically. But unlike the other brides, her spirit was never broken. She was horrified by what was done to her, how she was made the bride of a monster. Unlike the rest of the king's children, those born by Ahabat walked on 2 legs like men. They were hunters. They were heroes. She trained them in secret whenever she could, in hopes that one day they could fight the children of her sisters, could fight their own father, and overthrow them all. They did not succeed. But still, Ahabat would not be broken. She would no longer be the monster's bride. The 5th warrior was the apostate Fawn, sitting atop the Saturn deer. The 6th was Seth, the 3rd son of Adam, once forgotten in the shadow of his brothers. And, of course, the 7th warrior was Isabel, though she was better known by her full name, Isabel Helga Anastasia Parvati Wondertainment the 5th. Isabel was a Dr. Wondertainment, a girl filled with boundless enthusiasm and energy, hope for the power of joy and creativity, who grew into a woman buoyed by that same positivity and love for the world. She had the ability to create powerful, strange, anomalous toys. Her intentions were always good, even when she made mistakes. Now up against a force that stood for the destruction of all things, creativity was, at its core, the most powerful force. She was imbued with the ability to create, and that would be her greatest weapon, even greater than the spear in her hand. With this army of 7 assembled, each armed with a spear, it was time for the ultimate battle, the only hope of dethroning the Scarlet King. In the face of utter annihilation, the 7 rode on. First, Harker pierced the king's right eye with his spear. Next, Fawn pierced his left eye. Seth's spear pierced the wicked king's liver. The Exile, the man from nowhere, stabbed his spear through the king's hands. The Empress' spear pierced the king's feet. Ahabat the Unbroken broke the king's cold heart with the tip of her spear, piercing through it, and the fatal blow was struck by Isabel, who drove her spear through his very skull. Then, the 3 brothers, the 3 deaths, came to lay claim to that which they had been owed since the beginning of it all. They came to take the Scarlet King, to cast his body back down into the darkness. He had cheated death, had cheated them long enough. All was still, quiet, the silent chill of the grave. What now? There was nothing left. No soil in which to plant the seeds of new life. How could anyone possibly rebuild on a foundation of nothingness? Well, there was no such thing as true nothingness, not when imagination still lives, and Isabel had more imagination than anyone in this world or any other. In spite of everything, she smiled. Her eyes lit up with the fire of a new idea, a new beginning. A warm wind, scented like summer, swept through the throne room, stirring the air with life. Isabel took a deep breath in and breathed out. With that breath came light, came fire, song, and wonder. As these forces flowed out of her, they spread until they had traveled the entire world. All around her, all through reality, color seeped back into view. Life sprang from the cracked and ashen earth, and it all began again. This would be her finest invention, the only one that would ever really matter. She could put it all back. Sometime after Isabella began her holiest work, rebuilding creation anew, there was a forest, and in that forest, a lake of crisp, clear water. In the center of that lake, there stood a rocky island and a watchtower made of stone. Down in the dirt, something shifted, brush parted, and a soldier clad in armor emerged from the tree line, making their way to the edge of the water. Their armor was battle-worn, turned brown, red, and black. The exposed flesh was even worse for wear. Their skin was burnt, nearly flaking off. The stark white of skull peeked through the torn flesh of the scalp and around the eye socket. The jaw hung loose, dislocated, and the hair was burnt to ash. Such injuries should not have been survivable. In fact, they were not survivable at all. This soldier had died long ago, only to find themselves raised from the dead by the Brothers Three to fight in their army against the Scarlet King. But now, the battle was over. There was no need to keep fighting. It was time to lay down the sword, to cast off the armor, and to wash it all clean. The soldiers stripped away the gear of war and began to approach the water. They reached one hand, streaked with blood and dirt, scarred beyond recognition, and dipped it into the water. The dirt, the grime, the pain, all of it melted away in the current. Beneath the filth, there was smooth, unblemished skin, and impossible rebirth. The soldier kneeled and drank from the water, then began to bathe in it. Bones reset themselves. Old wounds grew back together. As they stepped deeper into the water, it seemed that all of the horrors of the past were washed clean, and the soldier left as something fresh, clean, and alive. It was more than a simple cleansing of the skin. It was healing. As Isabel, with the help of all death, worked to rebuild the world, so too was this fallen soldier rebuilt bit by bit. The soldier disappeared beneath the surface of the water. When the surface of the water broke again, a woman stood there. Her name had once been Marianne Lewitt of the Horizon Initiative. It all came back to her in a rush. The memories of who she had once been, who she was, miracle of miracles once more. Alongside her husband, Salah, she had fought against the Scarlet King and other evils. She had killed the evil god Moloch, but had died in the process, leaving behind her beloved Salah and their daughter Naomi. She wondered if she might find them in this new world if she looked. But first, she would take a moment. She would bathe in the water. She floated on her back, looking up at the beauty of the world. The trees, the sun, the birds in the sky, the pebbles and mud at the bottom of the pool. All of it made her heart swell, her breath catch in her throat out of sheer wonder. There was no more death here. There was only life. She swam back to the shore and stretched out on a patch of grass. There, in the sunlight, for the first time in so very, very long, she slept. She dreamed. When she woke, the sun was beginning to set, and there was a pile of clean clothes waiting for her. She dressed, not worrying where they came from, and stood. She walked through the forest, again awestruck by the beauty of creation. It was all here. It was all still here. Or indeed, it was all here once again. The trees, the chirping birds, the flowers, the buzzing bees flitting between them, the animals scuttling along the forest floor. She walked to the far side of the forest, where she spotted an old man scattering seeds for the birds. He was older now than she had ever seen him, but she knew his eyes. Those gentle eyes. Salah. She ran to him, diving into his arms, tears streaming down her face. She had never believed she could find herself here again, in the arms of the man she loved so dearly. She kissed his face again and again and again, and the two cried, holding each other so tight no force in the universe would dare split them apart again. She promised then never to let him go, never, ever again. Salah called out to someone standing in the darkness. A woman emerged, and Marianne wept at the sight of her little girl, Naomi, all grown up. Marianne could scarcely look at her, at the little girl she had lost. Not so little anymore. Naomi was older than Marianne had been when she died. Now her daughter had more gray in her hair than she did. And it was not just Naomi and Salah. Naomi had a husband, had children, a whole family waiting for Marianne as she dragged herself back out of the dark. Together, the family began to walk, not knowing quite where. They followed the road up into the hills, laughing, weeping, embracing. There was a little house on a hill. The lights were on. The end of the world went like this. Everyone lived happily ever after. The SCP Foundation is no stranger to pure evil. Whether it's a reptile that wants to end all life, a sadistic old man with his own torture dimension, or the personification of death itself lurking beyond a limestone cavern. But what if there was something even worse out there? The embodiment of chaos and cruelty, existing across multiple realities and dimensions. And what if it was coming for us? This is the Scarlet King, believed by many to be the ultimate evil behind much of the trouble the Foundation has faced, and some even speculate that fighting him was the reason the Foundation was created in the first place. But what exactly is the Scarlet King? He's known by many names, almost always including some allusion to the color red, and then a reference to royalty or power. Harak, Kaharak, the Red Shah, the Crimson Khan, PTE 616 Mendez Ex Machina, the Laha Raja, and, of course, SCP-001, to name a few. And like many of the Foundation's mysterious enemies, stories about his true nature and origins abound and are often contradictory. According to the official SCP-001 files of Tufto's proposal, symbology of the Scarlet King has existed in multiple cultures throughout history, with the king often depicted the same way, as a huge red demonic figure, often wearing a gold crown or other headdress indicating royalty. He shows up looking similarly within different cultures' mythologies, despite existing at different points in history or them not having the means to communicate with one another. A number of entities that the SCP Foundation is familiar with are believed to be somehow connected to the Scarlet King, including SCP-2317, a wooden door leading to the realm of a being known as the Devourer, who's expected to escape and cause an apocalyptic event in the next 30 years. But really, there's no way of knowing just how many SCPs are directly connected to the Scarlet King. Strangely, the Foundation's official file on the Scarlet King once designated his containment class as Keter, but that has since been downgraded to Safe. According to the file, any attempt to change this designation is likely to lead to horrifying results. It is widely known that the Scarlet King still has considerable influence over a number of groups, individuals, and anomalies in our universe. And if ever he made his way into our universe, it would likely lead to the irreversible damage of reality itself. So then why Safe? And why are the O5 Council so adamant that it remain that way? Getting to the bottom of this mystery is exactly why we're here today. But to fully grasp the true nature of the Scarlet King, we must first understand the man whose life and fate have always been tied to it, Dr. Robert Montauk. If that name feels oddly familiar to you, it's because of its association with one of the Scarlet King's most recent attempts to enter our reality, SCP-231. This SCP, often referred to as the Brides of the Scarlet King, was formed of 7 women. 7, by the way, being an extremely significant number for the king, all kidnapped by the most recent in a long line of the King's devoted cults known as the Children of the Scarlet King. Each of these 7 unfortunate women were impregnated with anomalous horrors, such as the infamous SCP-682, and every time one of these horrors were birthed, a catastrophe occurred and the mother died. At the time, Dr. Montauk was a prominent researcher studying this anomaly, and as 6 catastrophes had already occurred, pressure was mounting to figure out a way to prevent the final birth. But as he was working on the issue, Dr. Montauk was struck with a personal tragedy, the mysterious disappearance of his 14-year-old brother Jacob. In his fear and anger, Montauk believed that this must have something to do with the Scarlet King and his disciples. Wanting revenge, Montauk proposed an idea so horrifying that the details were never made public. A procedure known as 110 Montauk, to be performed on the final bride at regular intervals. However, this wasn't the end of Dr. Montauk's fraught relationship with the Scarlet King. It was just the beginning. To give you some perspective on just how dangerous the Scarlet King is, the SCP Foundation and the Global Occult Coalition decided to put aside their differences and form a joint effort to stamp out the children of the Scarlet King. They were successful in this mission, and even managed to capture the children's leader, a mysterious man named Depeche Spivak. Dr. Montauk, who became the lead researcher on 231 and 2317, was naturally the first choice for interviewing Depeche about the true nature of the children and of the Scarlet King. Dr. Montauk could never be the impartial interviewer that the SCP Foundation wanted, though. The suspicion that the Scarlet King or the children had something to do with the loss of his younger brother still lingered just beneath the surface. Like a lot of cult leaders, Depeche was extremely cryptic in his answers to Dr. Montauk's questioning. He'd already heard of the doctor from the reputation of the horrifying Montauk procedure, and was surprised to see him so calm and courteous in person. A few key facts about the king and his cult were revealed in the first few rounds of questioning. The children had once worked with the Serpent's Hand before being excommunicated for their allegiance to the king, and they had stolen sacred texts from the mystical Wanderer's Library to assist in their summoning rituals. Depeche also revealed that the Scarlet King is bound by 3 laws: the law of blood, the law of concrete, and the law of howling. Dr. Montauk, confused and frustrated by Depeche's secrecy, had to learn more. He found an old memoir from a former member of the Children of the Scarlet King, Jack Hirsch, who had the ability to invade the minds of people from the past and experience what they experienced. He recounted a battle between the Scarlet King and his followers, and a group of time-traveling Turkmen warriors from SCP-3838. Hurst saw both sides of the battle. From the perspective of the Children of the Scarlet King, their lord ruled over them from an immense fortress embedded in a volcano. From the perspective of the Turkmen, the children were starved and beaten peasants, commanded by the king's voice in the roaring howl of the wind. Montauk also found extensive records of summoning rituals performed by various Scarlet King-aligned cults. Interestingly, some of them incorporated the use of carved SCP Foundation symbols. What could this mean? Montauk returned again to Depeche, who finally gave him the truth about the law of blood. This is the law of the Scarlet King. It's defined by poverty, violence, starvation, hate, and most of all, fear. Like the serfs in the Middle Ages, persecuted by and subjected to violence from the nobles. To the Children of the Scarlet King, this sense of holy pain and awe is the only way to live. The alternative is the law of concrete, which means the modern age defined by empty safety and false comfort. Buildings, easy to access food, healthcare, knowledge, technology. This is everything that the Scarlet King despises. But the mystery only deepened as Montauk found files from a former Foundation operative by the name of Agent de Beauvoir. Montauk learned that the Scarlet King didn't seem to appear until after the Foundation was created. And in fact, it seemed that the greater interest the Foundation took in the Scarlet King, the more powerful he became. How could this be? Things were also getting stranger on a personal level for Dr. Montauk. Depeche repeatedly pressed him about his brother's disappearance and the Montauk procedure during the interviews. Little by little, it was beginning to take its toll. The questions still plagued him. What was the law of howling? Who or what really is the Scarlet King? How did he come to be? Montauk's search was causing him to act more like the children of the Scarlet King, ranting about the horrors of the modern world, how all of us are living a lie, how the only honest way to live is suffering under the dominion of the Scarlet King. This philosophy is summed up in the words of one cultist named Ariadne Cartwright, who said, "We must learn what it is to die, to be enslaved, truly, brutally enslaved, with no compassion or compunction from our masters. We must learn what it is to be taken towards a single purpose, to know and truly understand our lack of agency. We must be beholden to the words of gods and darkness, the tempest-tossed refuse of a race of fools. We must kill modernity, postmodernity, with all its analysis and sneering observation. There is only one rule, the rule of chaos, for humanity, for life, for the Scarlet King." Basically, anytime humanity tries to exert control over the world, the Scarlet King gets stronger. Every time they try to understand or organize or categorize their world, the Scarlet King gets stronger. As colonial and imperial powers conquered and invaded lands like India, Africa, and South America, and subjugated their beliefs under Western ideas, the Scarlet King grew stronger. Montauk was beginning to truly understand the power of his enemy here, and even worse, he was starting to understand his part in it. Montauk, slowly being driven mad by the knowledge he was gaining, realized that the Scarlet King's greatest enemy, the SCP Foundation, was also its greatest asset. Every time they tried to understand the monster, to give him some kind of comprehensible form, they only made him more powerful. Just in time with Montauk's new revelation, a red crack appeared in the wall of Depeche Spivak's containment cell, a portal to the realm of the Scarlet King. Foundation staff found they were unable to enter the cell, and Depeche demanded a final interview with Montauk. With no other options, the Foundation relented. In their very last conversation, Depeche congratulated Montauk for finally understanding what he was dealing with. The Scarlet King, Depeche told him, is an idea, a concept. He is a being given power through the conflict between the old and the new. This is the law of the howling. The Scarlet King's endless rage at the direction the world and humanity has taken. The king, according to Depeche, hated the Foundation's belief that science and rationality was the true path to progress. The king saw this as little more than petty arrogance. The reason Montauk's procedure on the final bride of the Scarlet King was so effective was because it wasn't born out of science. It was born out of hate, pain, the desire for revenge, and in the Scarlet King's realm, that would be all there is. Unless our world, and especially the Foundation, changed its course, the Scarlet King's rise to absolute power would be inevitable. Montauk, his mind practically gone, asked one last question. Did the children or the Scarlet King take his brother, Jacob? When Depeche told him the answer, no. And in response, Montauk shot him dead, finally bringing an end to the children of the Scarlet King. In light of his new revelations, Montauk begged the O5 Council to change their ways in order to avoid letting the Scarlet King break into our reality. They refused, saying Montauk's ideas were too radical. But they knew they couldn't just ignore the threat posed by the Scarlet King. They would have to take some steps. And so the O5 Council of the SCP Foundation, the most powerful and secretive group in the entire world, in order to prevent the most dangerous threat that humanity has ever known from breaking into our reality and enslaving all the people of the world, finally did something. They changed the classification of the Scarlet King from Keter to safe, and made its description on the official Foundation files deliberately vague. The O5 Council thinks this will be enough to stop the Scarlet King's power from continuing to grow, but Montauk knew it wasn't enough. He had seen the truth, and he couldn't unsee it. While the Foundation was going on as normal, Montauk grew to despise them. He knew the Scarlet King was coming. He knew that he couldn't be stopped, and that our whole reality was little more than sitting ducks. Dr. Robert Montauk is no longer a researcher for the SCP Foundation. No, Dr. Robert Montauk chose a different path. He's now a child of the Scarlet King, a devotee of madness, hate, and chaos. You can't beat the Scarlet King after all, and as the old adage goes, if you can't beat him, join him.
Any changes today? The younger security officer Zach asked as he stepped into the watchtower.
As if, replied his superior, a jaded, cynical old man who insisted on being referred to as Mr. Jefferson.
The darn thing hasn't moved, spoken, or done so much as stretch one of those wings of his. Another day at the office then, Zach joked.
Through the window, the pair of them looked through at the towering figure a few kilometers away. SCP-001, the Gate Guardian, stood motionless, its fiery sword in its hand, ever protecting its post at the precipice between our world and paradise. It had long been stationed at the entrance of a dimensional gateway that led to what was believed to be the Garden of Eden, described in the biblical Old Testament. Much like the security officers in the Foundation's base tasked with watching the Guardian, this was pretty much the extent of the day's activities.
Hey, did you see that news about the transfer posting?
Zach asked, trying to stave off boredom with as much conversation he could squeeze out of his fellow officer.
Yeah, I saw it.
Mr. Jefferson scoffed, rolling his eyes.
What possesses someone like Robert Montauk to come down here? Must have wanted a quieter post,
Zach reasoned, looking out at the stillness of the Gate Guardian.
Won't find one any quieter than here, Jefferson mused. Him showing up will be the most exciting thing that's happened here in a long while.
Unbeknownst to both Zach and Mr. Jefferson, Dr. Robert Montauk would be only joining the team at the Gate Guardian observation site for a short while. Not one of them, nor anybody else within the Foundation, could ever guess Montauk's true intentions behind venturing there in the first place. He wanted an audience with the Gate Guardian itself. Approaching the colossal 1,000-foot-tall being, Dr. Montauk crossed the threshold of the minimum safe distance from the Guardian. Given the sheer heat of its weapon, hotter than Earth's sun, anything within a kilometer of SCP-001 was at risk of being obliterated, vaporized into atoms if they didn't turn back, which, through a voice that immediately rang out in Montauk's ears, the Gate Guardian commanded him to do.
Leave!
Its psychic message boomed.
Wait!
Dr. Montauk urged, holding up his hands in what would have been a futile defense against the Guardian's sword.
I know what you do when people don't listen to your commands, but please, just give me a minute.
There was silence. SCP-001 didn't reply. There was nobody else close enough to hear Montauk speak to it. So, he continued.
You are impossibly old. We know that much about you. And because of that, you must have seen things that we can't even begin to imagine, much less fully comprehend. But I've come a very long way to request that you impart some information to me, if you can.
He paused again, as if waiting for a reply that never came. The Gate Guardian merely stood in the same defensive, unwavering stance.
Tell me, please, how much do you know about the Scarlet King?
By this point in time, although the Foundation was yet to realize, Dr. Robert Montauk was slowly going insane. His investigations into an anomalous entity known as the Scarlet King were gradually corrupting him, as he tried relentlessly to quantify exactly what this entity was, and how great of a threat it posed. Little did Montauk realize that, in trying so hard to define and comprehend the being, he was inadvertently fueling its power. The Scarlet King was an interdimensional warmonger, an embodiment of hatred and chaos, and Dr. Robert Montauk was slowly falling under the King's influence. Upon hearing the tiny human figure utter his question, the immense Gate Guardian rebutted with another single-word psychic command, one it had never been recorded giving before.
Witness!
As if his increasing instability and the creeping influence of the Scarlet King hadn't made Montauk feel bad enough, he instantly felt sick. There was a searing pain behind his eyes, like he was staring directly at the sun, accompanied by a nausea that made his head spin.
It took a moment of enduring the horrific sensation before he realized what was happening. The Guardian was trying to show him something. Rather than give any information on the Scarlet King verbally, SCP-001 was imparting a psychic vision onto Montauk, a memory of events long past, the answers he sought, a warning, or perhaps all three. The vision showed Montauk a time so long ago that it couldn't ever be forgotten, for there was barely anyone alive to remember it in the first place. It was eons in the past, long before the comparatively recent dawn of humanity, a time only spoken of in the Dust and Blood Tablet, an artifact of the Davite civilization, some of the earliest worshippers of the Scarlet King himself. And there, marching up to the entrance of Eden, was the crimson-clad eldritch abomination and a horde of horrors with him. According to the story recorded in the Dust and Blood Tablet, this would have been much earlier in the life of the Scarlet King, perhaps even before he assumed his now infamous title. Back then, he would most likely have been known as his original name of Kanthrak, one of multiple siblings born when the Tree of Life was planted, and thus created all life in the multiverse. But, being the only one of his siblings cursed with awareness, knowing the pain his existence brought him, Kanthrak would eventually set out on his lifelong mission to destroy all of existence across every dimension. And he started by killing his siblings, consuming them to claim their power for himself. Around this time in prehistory, the being that would one day become known as Scarlet King didn't quite possess the power that he would several millennia later. Although that's not to say he was an unformidable force of destruction, fueled by his singular hatred for existence. His vow to destroy extended to the Tree of Life that had caused him to be, along with the tree's creator and all of their creation. In other words, everything in the multiverse, all of creation, if you will. So what was the Scarlet King doing there so long ago, at the dimensional doorway protected by the Gate Guardian? Well, beyond the boundary, between it and the rest of the infinite multiverse, lay the supposed Garden of Eden. While it is unknown if it is in fact the same Eden referred to in the Book of Genesis is up for debate, especially among the Foundation. But at a glance, even through the gate, it certainly does look like a paradise. The space is filled with lush vegetation of astronomical size, populated by a number of beings that seem to resemble the Gate Guardian itself. And there, protected by its watchful caretaker, are two trees. One is thought to be the Tree of Knowledge, that Eve was tricked into eating an apple from during the Book of Genesis. The other, however, bears an unknown type of fruit, and is widely believed to be the Tree of Life. Now, back in the modern age, there's never been a conclusive link between the Tree of Life mentioned by the Davites and their barbaric civilization's legends regarding the creation of the Scarlet King. But the fact that so long ago he and his most feared generals were bearing down on the Gate Guardian's position, defending a garden where there was known to be a tree of that description, well, it all seems rather conclusive now. Alongside Kanthrak were 6 of his 7 daughters, each one of them a fearsome abomination much like their destructive father. As they approached, not one needed to exchange any words with their angelic protector of Eden. The Gate Guardian knew what these monsters were here for. They would stop at nothing to pass through his gate and uproot the Tree of Life, the progenitor of all living beings in all of existence. Even though it was early in Kanthrak's career as the rampaging interdimensional warlord he so is, he was as steadfast as ever in his goal to annihilate every corner of creation, every dimension, every parallel plane of reality, every single pocket of existence across infinity. They'd all come undone if he burned the Tree of Life, pulled it out at the roots, and splintered it until nothing remained. To the once and future Scarlet King, that the same tree had led to his own tortured existence. It was the source of his suffering, and it had to be destroyed. The only thing standing in his way was a figure as colossal as Kanthrak himself, wielding a flaming sword. Leave! Boomed the psychic voice of the Gate Guardian. It was like a doorman standing before a group of rowdy teenagers trying to force their way into a movie theater. Except these rowdy teens were the Scarlet King, his horrifying daughters, and the forces he had already amassed since his creation. The Horde stood ready, waiting for the commands of their king, who they thought would gladly lead the charge as they marched on the Garden of Eden to begin the destruction of existence. But that's not what happened. Usually, the Scarlet King would never shy away from a fight, preferring to lead the charge when it came to a slaughter. Instead, he commanded his first daughter, Atonement, to commence the first attack on the protector who stood in their path. On her foul father's word, Atonement took her horde and charged at the Guardian. What she and her forces lacked in numerical advantage, Atonement more than made up for in her knowledge of war. She hungered for it, sought dominion. That was her seal, after all. And yet, in the face of this impending onslaught, the Gate Guardian remained still, rooted to the same spot it had as always, and would always be standing in. A number of Atoment's minions burst into flames, the very fabric of their crude form separated on a molecular level as they were effortlessly rendered into nothingness. Still, the Gate Guardian hadn't appeared to move an inch, had exerted no energy, despite the damage it had done to Atonement and her forces in defense of Eden. As his first daughter screeched and howled in despair at the decimation of her horde, her children, the Scarlet King decided he needed to better understand his opponent. With a wave of his clawed crimson hand, the king commanded his next daughter, Aghor, to send forth her own army. In a tidal wave of nightmarish creatures, Aghor sent her horrific children into battle. She possessed a far greater quantity to do battle on her father's behalf. Perhaps Aghor even believed that was the Scarlet King's plan. With a greater number of her forces over her sisters, maybe she would be able to overwhelm the Guardian. But even as her own children began to be vaporized the closer that they got to the gate, Aghor had no idea she was little more than a pawn, being sacrificed so that Kanra could learn more about his imposing angelic enemy. Another of the Scarlet King's daughters, a being known as Anhuit, was the next called up to contribute to the unfolding battle. Although to call it a battle undersells just how easily the Gate Guardian seemed to be eliminating the oncoming forces without even moving. While an outwardly frail-seeming creature, Anhuit's primary strength over her sisters was a proficiency in magic, her innate ability to warp and reshape reality around her. It was that power that had caused her father to be wary of her, viewing Anhuit's abilities as a threat to his leadership. And so Kantrak had her crippled and all her children, leaving them unable to overthrow him, but still loyal to their king. Obeying her father's command, perhaps out of the same loyalty or fear that he would harm her and her children further if she disobeyed, Anhuit unfurled her magic. She reshaped the world around them, making it so that the passage of time moved so much slower. And that was what revealed to the Scarlet King his enemy's greatest strength in combat. The Gate Guardian had so far been able to obliterate both Atonement and now Aghor's forces without seeming to move, but it wasn't by standing still. It was moving, just much faster than the blink of Scarlet King's multiple eyes. Now that Anhuit's magic had slowed the passage of time, the Gate Guardian could be seen doing battle. As Aghor's atrocities spilled towards the angel to try and overwhelm it, it effortlessly blocked the oncoming attacks with its sword. Everything the flaming blade connected with instantly evaporated, bursting into atoms as they were practically cleaved out of existence by the Gate Guardian's mighty weapon. Even with time slowed to a crawl, the towering winged protector of Eden only appeared to be moving at an average speed. But when time flowed normally, without Anhuit manipulating reality, the Guardian was simply too fast to be observed. Resisting the urge to dive headfirst into the fight himself, the Scarlet King knew it would likely lead to his untimely demise. He refused to accept that. It could not happen, but he still had yet to amass the strength he would need as he continued his ascent. So while time was slowed to a crawl and the Gate Guardian was still engaged in combat with Aghor's forces, he turned to another of his remaining daughters, Adista. If the Scarlet King and his forces couldn't get past the Guardian, they could still try to get to the Tree of Life while the Protector's focus was diverted. Adistat unleashed a wave of pestilence, sickness, and disease spewing from her in a cloud of vapor, heading straight towards the angelic garden and Eden's entrance beyond. The Scarlet King knew this latest attack wouldn't phase or weaken the Gate Guardian. He hoped the foul smog would instead pass through the gateway itself into the garden. As Adistat sent forth her power, blood and ash soaked the landscape around them.
All the plants outside the entrance to Eden withered and died, shriveling and decomposing as the disgusting fog rolled towards the gate. It washed over the Guardian, whose form only seemed to glow brighter as he repelled the pestilence. It was as if it didn't even need to think about it, still focused on finishing off the rest of the oncoming army. As its glow intensified, so did the fiery sword that the Gate Guardian swung with ease and finesse. Flames burst from the blade, the encroaching fumes catching fire, along with the air itself. It ignited in a wave of fire, a defensive inferno that repelled this latest attack. But for a brief few moments, while time stayed slow, before Anhuit's hold on reality inevitably broke, the king had sent forth Atilif. Of all his spawn, she was the most reserved, keeping mostly to herself, never speaking. She and her children could change their faces and forms, shift into anything or anyone, and walk undetected through the multiverse. And now her father was employing her incredible stealth abilities to slip behind enemy lines, while the Gate Guardian was finishing off the remaining onslaught from Kanhrak's other daughters. It was as Atilif drew near, creeping unseen closer and closer to the entrance, keeping the Scarlet King out of Eden, that the Guardian seemed to pause. It slowly, ominously turned its huge head, tilting until it was looking directly at Atilif. If its expression could be seen, maybe the Gate Guardian would almost be impressed that someone was able to sneak past it. After all, it was a feat that no other being in creation could ever hope to accomplish. But then again, with its steadfast conviction and dedication to its protective duty, maybe it would have looked upon Atilif with anger. With a cleaving swing of its scorching sword, the Gate Guardian unfurled a tidal wave of fire that engulfed everything around it. Not just Atilif, but Ativik, Aghor, and Adista, all the king's daughters that had attacked so far, along with every one of their own children, were instantly obliterated. They were all reduced to empty, vacant spaces where they had once been, their atoms separated by the searing swing of the Guardian's weapon. The devastating blow by his adversary did little to deter the Scarlet King from his mission. He was still set on destroying the Tree of Life, and no loss was too great in his pursuit of destroying existence. He barely cared that 4 of his own daughters had just been unmade by the Guardian. Anhuit was still there, clinging on to time as if it were a thrashing animal. The Scarlet King could simply make her restore her fallen sisters and their forces. He had lost nothing, but had held back for too long, and slowly drew his own weapon out of thin air. Wielding a sword that was as blood-soaked as the Guardian's was hot, the Scarlet King locked blades with the one being standing in their way. Both the ancient angelic defender and the attacking eldritch abomination were evenly matched. Every one of their vicious strikes against the other met with an equally strong parry. A weapon of extreme, all-consuming heat blocked swipes from a sharp, serrated edge that matched the deep red that would be forever synonymous with Kanhrak. The force of their 2 swords clashing and striking each other was so great that it rippled out from their one-on-one fight. The landscape around them was flattened, wiped clean of any remaining plant life that hadn't already been destroyed by the forces of the king's daughters. Despite having acquired nowhere near the power he would thousands of years after this fight, the Scarlet King was still a formidable force in single combat, and yet the Gate Guardian seemed incapable of tiring or weakening, still standing strong against the onslaught. Even after wiping multiple armies out with its flaming sword, the Guardian was still able to hold its own against the Scarlet King, who was furious, enraged at being so close to the Tree of Life, yet unable to get past his angelic adversary. He'd need to be stronger, faster, even more ruthless than the warlord he already was. Despite Anhuit slowing down time, the King and the Guardian were at a stalemate. Time. That was it. The Scarlet King needed more time. Withdrawing from the fight, he realized that this was a battle that could not be won by sheer brute force alone. His mission to destroy all creation, to get to the Tree of Life, would take cunning, deception, and more time. If he let it, the Gate Guardian could easily kill Kanhrak. Its flaming weapon could cleave him out of existence, and that would end the King's torment. But it wouldn't be enough.
A death would be unsatisfying, knowing that the rest of existence would go on after he was gone. The Scarlet King couldn't accept that. It wasn't enough. So he did the one thing nobody would expect of him. He made a deal with the Gate Guardian. It was an action still fueled by his infinite hatred for all existence, his yearning for total chaos. The Scarlet King knew that one day, an event would arrive where the Guardian and the other beings like it in the Garden of Eden would spill forth and deliver judgment on this world. And when that rapture happened, the Tree of Life would be undefended. The Scarlet King bartered with the Guardian that he would retreat for the time being so he could spend eons amassing more and more power. Then, when the fateful day arrived, the Gate Guardian would allow him into Eden to destroy the Tree of Life, while it and its brethren were busy conducting the rapture. Halting their fight, the Scarlet King offered a crimson claw to the Gate Guardian's burning hand. Returning to reality from the intense vision, still feeling sick at what he had witnessed, Robert Montauk looked up at the still, silent form of the Gate Guardian.
"Did you do it?"
He yelled, desperate to know more through his obsession with the Scarlet King.
"Did you tell him yes? Did you make a deal?"
There was no answer from the Guardian, just a single word that echoed through Montauk's fractured mind.
Leave!
The Scarlet King is a really bad guy. He's a giant interdimensional nightmare god, intent on breaching our reality and wreaking terrible havoc on everything we know and love. He's been responsible for untold suffering and chaos across countless worlds, timelines, and layers of reality. To many, he's even somewhat of a final boss to the SCP Foundation. And just when you think he couldn't get any worse, it turns out that he's also a deadbeat dad. Not only did the Scarlet King once have a cult literally named the Children of the Scarlet King, before it was destroyed by Dr. Montauk and the SCP Foundation, he also had at least 7 actual children. Each one is speculated to be a powerful anomaly, but it's tough to find concrete answers as to who or what exactly most of them are. So today we're putting on our researcher hats and digging deep into the Foundation's lore to present our theories on the potential progeny of the SCP Foundation's greatest enemy. And if nothing else, we may finally be able to get this Dark Lord of all evil to start paying all the child support he probably owes by now. First, if you're not well versed in Scarlet King lore, you may be wondering, how exactly does an evil chaos god have kids? Is there a Scarlet Queen out there who prefers to stay out of the limelight? The answer isn't quite that simple, and it has everything to do with SCP-231 and Big Red's most devoted cult, the non-biological children of the Scarlet King. They kidnapped a group of 7 girls and performed a number of dark rituals that resulted in them becoming vessels for the Scarlet King's 7 terrible kids. These 7 girls have become known as SCP-231. Anyone who accesses those files, and trust us, they aren't a pretty sight, will find that the containment procedures mostly involve performing the infamous Montauk procedure on the surviving girls to keep them from giving birth. 6 of the 7 brides have given birth to nightmares beyond comprehension and are now dead, with only one still remaining successfully contained. But here at the SCP Foundation, you need to learn to comprehend the incomprehensible. According to a classified document, SCP-231 may technically be a neutralized anomaly without us even knowing. And incidentally, this gives us our most certain answer on the Children of the Scarlet King. On this one, the apple fell very, very far from the tree. According to the secret document, SCP-999, that's right, the adorable tickle monster, is the 7th child of the Scarlet King. He must be so disappointed that everyone's favorite little blob didn't want to join the family business of absolute evil. For anyone who doesn't know, SCP-999 is a slimy yellow entity that only seems capable of absolute compassion. It brings joy to everyone in its presence, and with prolonged exposure it can even cure disorders like PTSD, anxiety, and depression. He's so good at this that he even cured SCP-231-7, his de facto mother, of her trauma, and allowed her to return happily to her family after some amnestic treatment. The Scarlet King has another good reason to be ashamed of his cheerful, blobby son. Ancient Dividi prophecy dictates that SCP-999 may someday become so powerful that his force of absolute love and good overwhelms the Scarlet King's evil and chaos. Think of him as the Luke Skywalker to the Scarlet King's Darth Vader. though we probably can't expect a cool lightsaber battle between them anytime soon. How disappointing. So if SCP-099 is the quiet, sensitive black sheep of the Scarlet family, who's the golden child who makes his evil father proud? The real chip off the old block? That would be our dear reptilian friend, SCP-682, the malicious lizard heavily implied to be a child of the Scarlet King. If you know literally anything about 682, your reaction to finding out that he's the spawn of cruelty personified is probably, yeah, that makes sense. Just as SCP-999 is the Scarlet King's innocent, optimistic young child, 682 is kind of like his edgy teenager. Still in the middle of a misanthropic phase, he shows no sign of leaving anytime soon. The fact that 682 appears to find anything about the world around him utterly disgusting seems to be a trait he inherited from his dear old dad. And the fact he seems pretty much impossible to kill also lends credence to the popular theory he's got nightmare god blood running through his veins. 682 has also started displaying a particular hatred for 999 ever since an incident where 999 tickled him into submission, so family dinners are probably extra awkward for these two. 999 and 682 are the most certain children, but that still leaves us with 5 more children to identify. It's worth remembering that the waters are murkier from here on in, but we've searched far and wide through the Foundation archives to find possible answers. If your interpretation differs, remember that it's just a theory, an SCP-explained theory. Thankfully, we do have some assistance here. The tale Dust and Blood hinted at what each of the 7 children of the Scarlet King represents, and that may help us narrow down our choices here. To put things into perspective, it's believed that 682 was the 4th child to be born, representing wrath, and 999 was the 7th, representing hope. According to this tale, the first of the 7 children represents dominion, and as a result, is skilled in the ways of war and has the power to lead the king's forces to victory. According to one Foundation theorist, this child could potentially be SCP-239, also known as the Witch Child. This entity is so powerful that, as part of its normal containment procedures, it's eternally kept in a coma. Why? Because this seemingly normal child has dominion over reality and can change it to her whims. Her thoughts are so powerful that just her brainwaves can damage physical matter, and she can make things disappear or manifest in an instant. She's also impossible to kill, with skin that's almost totally impenetrable. Much like SCP-682, she's also frighteningly strong in both the offense and defense department. We're talking about such a powerful telepath that Dr. Clef has campaigned for her immediate termination, just because it's safer that way. This is certainly a frightening wonderkin that the Scarlet King would be proud to call his daughter. Next, the 2nd child. According to the prophecy, this child represents longing. The child has the power to bring forth armies, which will help the Scarlet King in his conquest. For this, we actually have a pretty unconventional theory. SCP-029, also known as the Daughter of Darkness. If the name alone wasn't enough to suggest that she's got an extremely sinister father, she also fits the profile of being very aggressive and incredibly hard to kill. But even more damning is her connections to the symbology of longing. One of her most dangerous powers is causing men to fall into almost trance-like devotion to her. After spending time around her, they're suddenly willing to murder in her honor, strangling their victims in hopes of raising Kali, the Hindu god of destruction, whom has many similarities to the Scarlet King. She certainly fits the bill of someone capable of raising armies in the Dark Lord's name. One strike against our Scarlet King connection theory is that the file states the Daughter of Darkness was first discovered in India, which wouldn't match up with the other information we know to be fact. However, while this is a long shot, given the sensitive nature of everything involving the Scarlet King, it's extremely possible that false information was supplied to bury the connection. Considering the cover-ups and lies involving anomalies like SCP-1000, this certainly isn't an unprecedented move on the part of the Foundation. Next, the 3rd child. This child is associated with all things desolation, implying destruction, fire, ashes, pestilence, and death across the battlefield. When it comes to spreading destruction and death on a mass scale, one particular SCP comes to mind: SCP-058, the Heart of Darkness. This creature has Scarlet King written all over it. It's evil, it's mysterious, it's pretty much impossible to kill, and it causes mass casualties every time it escapes its containment chamber. It causes fires, whips people to death with its razor-sharp tendrils, and sprays highly corrosive acid from its scorpion-like tail. And it's even red. Given that we know for a fact this entity suddenly emerged out of something that's now been expunged from the records in an undisclosed site, it's extremely possible that the entity 058 came from was SCP-231-3. This is a child that the Scarlet King would definitely be proud of, given that it's impossible to reason with and feels solely motivated by causing destruction, misery, and chaos. We can't think of an entity that better suits the desolation moniker than SCP-058. Next, skipping past SCP-682 at number 4, the 5th child of the Scarlet King is associated with the loose concept of lack. The prophecy then goes into more detail, saying that this child is powerful in the ways of magic and is able to use their abilities to cause great destruction. Here we have another unconventional proposal. What if child number 5 wasn't actually a child, but children? That's because we think this description perfectly fits SCP-1765, the nightmarish reality-warping sisters, who we think may actually be triplets of the Scarlet King's 5th bride. Now hear us out. These are actually some of the most powerful enemies the Foundation has ever attempted to contain, and we know nothing about their past before being bound to a few objects by the Serpent's hand. These sadistic reality warpers are so devastatingly powerful that the only action the Foundation can take against them is letting them have free reign over the containment site they currently inhabit. All the Foundation can do is hope they never get bored of tormenting the people inside. As we all know, the Scarlet King despises science, progress, and order, so perhaps a perfect punishment for the Foundation in his many eyes is giving them a taste of their own medicine. The sisters, though particularly their ringleader, are a perverse shadow of the Foundation's love of the scientific method. They take these methods and use them for an activity that the Scarlet King finds much more enjoyable: tormenting and killing people. Whenever these crafty triplets set their mind to it, their horrifically powerful magic is able to cause massive devastation, just like the prophecy for the 5th bride's offspring dictates. And finally, the 6th child of the Scarlet King. The concept associated with this one is hidden, meaning it can change its face and walk unnoticed through creation. It's also said to have the responsibility of opening the ways between worlds and allowing the war to end all wars to first begin. There have been a huge number of guesses for this spot, with some even suggesting SCP-055, the anti-meme. But since we're having fun here, we also want to make an even wilder suggestion. We posit that the 6th child of the Scarlet King is Allison Chow, also known as LS and the Black Queen, the most powerful member of the Serpent's Hand. We get it, we have a lot of explaining to do, but hear us out. Allison Chow is a member of the Serpent's Hand, or technically many members. Multiple versions of her exist across parallel dimensions in the SCP multiverse. They're mostly all estranged daughters of Foundation researcher Dr. Charles Gears. This estrangement leads them to collaborate in the Wanderer's Library, the secret base of the Serpent's Hand, to conduct raids on the Foundation in revenge. But what if the leader of these alternate Allisons had an ulterior motive? Because in the infinite number of possibilities offered by the multiverse, this one was not the daughter of Charles Gears, but the Scarlet King. She's merely using the pain of her counterparts to manipulate them into accomplishing her true father's goal, undermining the SCP Foundation. Let's break it down. The hidden child is prophesied to walk unnoticed through creation. Not only does Allison Chow appear human, the use of SCP-268, a newsboy cap that causes the wearer to become unnoticed, allows her to walk anywhere through creation without being detected. But most importantly of all, the hidden child is said to be the one who opens the way for the Scarlet King's entrance into our dimension. And Allison Chow has access to the Wanderer's Library, an unfettered access point between dimensions. If one of the infinite Allisons was the secret daughter of the Scarlet King, would the Wanderer's Library not be a perfect way for him to leave his own dimension and enter ours? She could be the final piece he needs, hidden under the nose of the Foundation and the Serpent's Hand, making all the secret power plays to allow for the Scarlet King's eventual bloody revenge on our world. Unless, of course, SCP-999, the family disappointment, stops him first. We realize that some of these theories may seem surprising, but when it comes to the anomalous, especially the Scarlet King, the only thing you can ever expect is the unexpected. Do you agree with our theories? If not, who do you think are the children of the Scarlet King? Let us know down in the comments. One thing is for certain. We hope we never meet any of the terrible tyrant's nasty children. Except the Tickle Monster, of course. He can hang with us anytime.
Panic had set in. Researchers were frantic. There was a buzz of activity, not born of excitement, but from sheer, widespread fear. The Scarlet King was coming. Nobody at the Foundation knew when or even how the monstrous multiversal tyrant would spring free and bring endless chaos with him, but everyone knew it would be soon. They'd all had the same warning, the same nightmare. In fact, it wasn't just the Foundation either. The entire world had shivered in their sleep, sharing in the bad dream of the destruction that was yet to come. The personnel of the SCP Foundation were on high alert. Of course, the organization had been aware of the impending threat of the Scarlet King for longer than almost anyone else, but that was part of the problem. Through some anomalous dream had by everyone on Earth, now everyone else knew. The Foundation was less interested in uncovering the source of the nightmare, and more trying to counteract its potential side effects. That was what potentially offered the Scarlet King the power he needed to enter into reality after all. The more people knew about him, tried to understand or to find the eldritch entity, the more power he was able to obtain.
We have an army!
One member of personnel chimed in during a frantic debate.
We have an almost unlimited fighting force that are specially trained to handle anomalous threats, the MTF. Are you crazy?
Another argued.
The MTFs are certainly not unlimited. At any rate, the Scarlet King might be one of the most powerful beings in the entire multiverse. How can our troops, even our anomalous units, even hope to stand against that? You're proposing sending our people into a slaughter.
They'd all be wiped out in a moment, one of the other researchers concurred. We need to be focusing our efforts on the amnestic rollout. If we can distribute enough to the population, we can wipe their collective memories of the dream from the other night. They'll forget, and that should slow the approach of the Scarlet King.
Slow him, maybe, but it won't stop him,
the first retorted.
Full-scale retaliation is still our best option. Even now, while we try to come up with a strategy that could be enough to draw him in, we're willing him into existence as we speak. What about deploying another SCP?
Came a voice from the edge of the group. It belonged to junior researcher Jake Harrison, a relatively new member of the Foundation who had been reading up on files related to the Scarlet King. He knew that in trying to understand and come up with a way to best the murderous multiversal warlord, that he was inadvertently feeding him power. But Jake seemed to have stumbled on the one solution that everyone else had overlooked. There was already another anomaly that might have been perfectly suited for defeating the Scarlet King.
What do you suggest, Harrison?
One of the other researchers spat. You really think something like 682 would be willing to work with us and destroy the Scarlet King? That's absurd.
I heard 682 is meant to be one of the Scarlet King's children,
another remarked.
No, not 682,
Jake argued, turning to the researcher that had just made a comment about the entity's supposed children, a group of anomalies that we believe to have been born of the Scarlet King himself.
But you're on the right track.
We use SCP-001. The group of researchers looked dumbfounded at Jake. He couldn't tell if they were about to yell at him or they would all burst out laughing. To his surprise, they actually looked to be considering his proposal. It was widely believed that SCP-099, the adorable blob of orange slime known as the Tickle Monster, was actually the final child of the Scarlet King.
That's not entirely implausible,
one of the researchers answered.
SCP-099 is believed to be an ultimate force for good that could, in theory, defeat his father.
The Scarlet King is meant to be unparalleled chaos. The two could cancel each other out, another theorized.
But the Tickle Monster, sorry, SCP-099, it's an infant, a child,
someone else pointed out.
Even if it could one day beat the Scarlet King, it's nowhere near strong enough to yet. We might have days, minutes even, before he arrives, and I don't know if 999 has the power to stop his father.
Then what if we could make him stronger? Jake replied, a risky idea brewing in his head. Surely you aren't suggesting. Suddenly a loud rumbling rang out, like an earthquake, only much louder. And instead of coming from the ground below, the noise was coming from the sky. The Foundation's researchers raced in the nearest window or ran out of the buildings they were in to turn their gazes upward. Scored across the sky above was a deep, blood-red crack.
a wound in the fabric of reality itself. It was huge, almost covering one horizon to the next, and everyone looking at it knew what it meant. That crack in the sky heralded the approach of the Scarlet King. Junior researcher Harrison spent the next hour impatiently trying to get a hold of someone, anyone who could approve his proposal. The O5 Council were already swamped with suggestions for how to stop the Scarlet King, each one contributing to his rapid approach. Eventually, Jake made it through and spoke directly with a representative, an underling for the O5 Council.
Listen to me, he urged. I know this isn't your department, but I need someone to sign off on this, please. The lives of everyone in this reality could depend on it.
What are you proposing?
The clockworks, SCP-914, Jake answered. We place SCP-999 inside, speed up the process, and make him strong enough to stop the Scarlet King.
It was an astronomical gamble, using the anomalous improvement machine, constructed of a multitude of clockwork components, cogs, gyros, gears. SCP-914 was a device that could be used to enhance or refine any object placed inside its input booth. Depending on the setting, items could be transformed, destroyed, or vastly improved using the clockworks. Rough setting disintegrated any test subject, while coarse dismantled it to its base components. One-to-one replaced any item with an almost identical copy. Then there were the fine and very fine settings. The former would cause 914 to improve any item, and the later capable of the same, but with one key difference. Very fine would refine an object even more, usually by giving it anomalous properties. Jake had read up on SCP-914 and knew that the Foundation had permitted researchers to conduct tests using the machine. However, following a catastrophic test, nothing organic could be tested in SCP-914. That was a strict rule. No biological organism or living thing of any description was to be placed within the clockworks. It was Jake's hope, however, that desperate times called for desperate measures. Surely, with the Scarlet King almost upon them, the Council would waive the restriction and allow SCP-999 to undergo refinement. The O5 Council representative's voice cut out after Jake made his suggestion. There was a long pause. Even without the pressure of incoming calamity, the silence seemed to extend for a painfully long time. Suddenly, someone else spoke up in their place, a modulated, distorted voice. It quickly became clear to Jake that he was talking directly to a member of the O5 Council. Under a different set of circumstances, he might have felt honored, but right now it was almost as scary as the threat of destruction by the Scarlet King.
Listen closely, junior researcher,
the council member said on the other end of the comm line.
You may think you understand SCP-914. You may even think that it might aid us in stopping the current crisis, but you are far, far mistaken. You will cease this current course of action immediately. Your proposal has been denied.
But wait, Jake protested. Surely it could work. I know biological material isn't permitted inside the clockworks, but that doesn't mean it can't affect living matter. SCP-999 is a living organism. If he really is everything we think he is, and we just put him through the refinement process, he could—
No, researcher Harrison, the voice barked. Using the clockworks would mean we risk losing 999.
What are you talking about?
You appear to have a fundamental misunderstanding of SCP-914, junior researcher, the council member chastised. It doesn't merely improve upon existing objects, but replaces them with a new version it creates. If we were to place 999 inside, the creature as we know it would be gone forever. And if it really is capable of stopping this catastrophe, we will then have lost our ultimate weapon against the Scarlet King.
But
Jake tried to say. Enough! Every second we waste discussing our options, the more power the Scarlet King is able to amass.
So why don't we stop talking and actually do something?
The young researcher shouted, giving in to his frustration and losing his temper. The comm line went dead. There was no one on the other end anymore. Another rumbling sound rippled through the building, even louder than the last tremor. Jake ran towards a nearby window and looked out in horror. It was already too late. The red crack above had split open wider, and like a tidal wave, hordes of nightmarish creatures came spilling out, raining down on the world. And commanding them, sending forth his minions in a flood of destruction, was the Scarlet King himself. Jake was done waiting for permission from the council. He sprinted as fast as he could through the facility, past panicked researchers fleeing for their lives, while security officers and MTF troops abandoned their posts in the futile hope they could survive the end of this reality and all others. Jake forced himself not to pay attention. He needed to find SCP-999.
the playful blob was often free to roam around the facility, improving the days of anyone it encountered. So all Jake needed to do was find anyone who seemed happy despite the catastrophe, and SCP-001 wouldn't be so far away. Outside, the world began to resemble the nightmare that everyone had experienced the night before. Cities were burning as monstrous abominations tore through innocent civilians and ripped buildings and cars to shreds, reducing every nearby standing structure to little more than rubble with frightening speed and ease. The Scarlet King and his armies had been waiting for this moment for centuries, millennia, eons even. And now nothing could stop them from unfurling pure, indulgent chaos on this reality. They had their work cut out for them, subjugating and destroying the entire multiverse, but that isn't to say they weren't enjoying it. People across the Earth were being killed in droves in the name of the Scarlet King. He diverted a significant portion of his forces to attacking the SCP Foundation itself, while the boots-on-the-ground MTF troops, the ones that had remained loyal, were usually a formidable fight. They were no match for the eldritch armies of the Scarlet King. The Horde began to set free other anomalies kept locked up in containment, either by accident when they stormed the Foundation facilities, or intentionally seeking out their cells to spring them. Some SCPs tried to stand up to the Scarlet King and fight back. The likes of the Plague Doctor, the Spectre, and SCP-2800 all tried their best to ward off the oncoming attacks of the Scarlet King's foot soldiers. They lasted longer than those who decided instead to run away, turning heel and trying in vain to escape the destructive reach of the Scarlet King. Even anomalies like SCP-106, who could escape to other planes of existence or pocket dimensions, weren't safe. In hiding, they were only prolonging the inevitable. The Scarlet King would find them all. No corner of the multiverse was safe. And of course, some SCPs thrived in the catastrophe. Creatures like SCP-682, the infamous hard-to-destroy reptile, found themselves free to exact revenge on the Foundation and humanity at large. Of these, not all the anomalies gave away their allegiance. 682 in particular was too busy killing anything it came into contact with, whether they were human or part of the Scarlet King's army. But other SCPs gladly swore fealty with the Crimson Cosmic Conqueror, forming alliances with the entity responsible for setting them loose and joining the massive monstrosities he had unleashed. And yet, in the midst of all the chaos, the calamity, and the millions upon millions of deaths, one junior SCP Foundation researcher was still searching for the wholesome orange blob. Jake Harrison had put all his chips on SCP-999 and eventually tracked the tickle monster down. The building around him was crumbling, attacks from the Scarlet King and his minions bombarding every second. As Jake ran into the mess hall, his eyes instantly caught sight of the ball of orange slime, cowering under a table. Hey, he whispered, hoping to coax it out. It's okay, I know there's a lot going on right now. Hell, it's the end of the world outside, but if you come with me, I think we can fix it together. Come on, little guy, what do you say? As if in reply, 999 immediately leaped up out of its hiding place. Jake caught it in his arms, instantly feeling a wave of calm wash over him thanks to the tickle monster's calming, anomalous effect. He tried to stop himself from fully succumbing to the good vibes that the gelatinous creature provided. After all, he still had a job to do, and time was short. The Scarlet King and his invading army might have seemed, for the most part, to be indulging in wanton destruction, decimating cities and Foundation sites, killing humans left, right, and center. But Jake figured that if there was any method to their madness, then SCP-999 would be at the very center of it. Not even the Scarlet King knew for certain if SCP-999 really was his offspring. Maybe he had heard the rumors and wanted to reach the tickle monster just before it had a chance to stop him, if it even could. If the Scarlet King believed even for a second that his supposed son stood a chance at defeating him and ending his reign of terror, then he'd waste no time hunting the orange blob down. His army of nightmarish creatures would comb every corner of the world until they found SCP-999. Although they might not think to look inside the clockworks. Placing the smiling, slimy SCP in the input booth, Jake fiddled with the controls for SCP-914. He'd never performed any experiments using the machine before, but it was all pretty self-explanatory, throwing the dial to very fine. He gave a moment's pause, looking at the adorable anomaly in the machine. The warning from the Council rang in his ears. If he activated the clockworks, he'd in effect be killing SCP-999. Either that or the Scarlet King would do it himself when he found the tickle monster. Neither scenario ended well. Then the thundering sounds of the massacre outside got louder, screams coming from innocent people who were being caught in the Scarlet King's carnage. There was no question about it. If what Jake was about to do really could stop all this mayhem, then it was worth replacing SCP-099 to do it. With a deep breath, he flipped the switch. The clicking and clacking of the clockwork's components whirred into life were drowned out by the approaching tremors. Something was coming. No, he was coming, Jake thought. The very fabric of the building around him started shaking, brickwork and cement crumbling and falling apart as a large hand, fingers ending in pointed crimson claws, wrenched open the roof with ease. Looking up in horror, Jake saw that the sky was a dark shade of red. Towering over it, a colossal crimson-clad warrior looked in on the frightened researcher, horns protruding from its head. Maybe because SCP-099 was still nearby, the blob was offering him some kind of positive mental protection. Otherwise, the mere sight of the gigantic monstrous being above him would have driven Jake and any other mortal mad. The Scarlet King was upon him.
Where is he?
Came a booming voice that sounded like hundreds of screams overlaying each other. The Scarlet King's gaze seemed to shift slightly, turning from Jake as he lay helplessly on the ground to look at SCP-914. The machine had fully activated and couldn't be stopped now. Either through foreknowledge or some kind of cosmic sense, the eldritch monstrosity seemed to know exactly what the device did.
No! What have you done?
The Scarlet King roared. He raised a gargantuan fist and brought it straight down through the air towards Jake. He couldn't run. The Scarlet King was so vast in size that there was no way the researcher would be able to evade the oncoming strike. Jake raised his arms in a futile attempt to protect himself, despite knowing that the Scarlet King's fist would likely plunge through the very surface of the earth below. But then again, maybe the junior researcher just didn't want to watch. There was a pause. The strike never came. It was only when Jake built up the courage to open his eyes that he saw what had happened. A long tendril of orange slime had reached out of SCP-914, forming a protective barrier between Jake and the Scarlet King. Suddenly, with all the force of a tidal wave, the newly refined SCP-999 came pouring out of the clockworks. The tickle monster's mass had increased. He was thousands, if not millions of times bigger. Swept aside and out of harm's way by the orange slime, the junior researcher looked up in amazement as SCP-999 reached up into the sky, able to look its supposed father face to face. The Scarlet King recoiled in horror as the tickle monster engulfed him, pulling the cosmic crimson plunderer into an embrace. As they hugged, there seemed to be a change in the Scarlet King. The eldritch monster had spent all his time since the dawn of creation as a cruel, nihilistic conqueror. He had killed and enslaved, devoured ancient gods, and slaughtered entire planes of existence in his quest to annihilate everything. But now, held tight by his gelatinous son, his heart shifted. It was as if the Scarlet King's eyes had been opened, and he could see the beauty of creation. The sheer overwhelming goodness of SCP-999, enhanced by SCP-914, undid the evil of the Scarlet King himself. Only it didn't stop. As the orange slime engulfed the Scarlet King in a hug, he began to be unmade. The tickle monster, without even trying to harm its father, had been made into such a beacon of pure positivity by the clockworks that the Scarlet King simply ceased to exist. He was unwoven, not killed, but rendered without any purpose. He barely even felt any pain, but at the same time was removed from this and every other universe. And still, it didn't stop. The newly recreated SCP-999 spread across the world like an orange flood. The Scarlet King's armies, the other SCPs, even the few surviving human beings were all wiped away. SCP-999 spread to every corner of the Earth, turning the blue planet orange as he coated it, purging every single scrap of negativity, all hatred, all cruelty, all evil, even that of the SCP Foundation itself. The entire world was unmade by the tickle monster, not out of malice, but so that nobody anywhere could cause the Scarlet King to reemerge. At the same time, all that was left was a planet-sized ball of orange slime, lonely spinning through space.
The Scarlet King. It says something that in a multiverse full of terrifying, world-ending monsters like the Sealed King, the Hanged King, a lot of kings come to think of it, the Crimson Khan himself overpowers them all. But today we want to pose and hopefully answer an interesting question. How actually powerful is the Scarlet King? After all, he's apparently the greatest threat the Foundation has ever faced. We'd be fools to not analyze what we're dealing with as an adversary here. Despite his exploits being well documented, there's a lot about the Scarlet King's personal life we still don't know. What is he doing to pass the time in that multiversal void while awaiting his minions to open a portal into our world? Does he have friends? Fulfilling hobbies? Do you think he watched Squid Game like the rest of us? We just don't know. Because of these gaps in our knowledge, we're taking a pretty wide definition of power here. We're not only going to analyze the presumed abilities of the king himself, but also his reputational and institutional power, including the abilities of the allies and henchmen in his thrall. And of course, to keep things balanced, we're also going to take a look at his weaknesses, both potential and confirmed, to get a bigger picture of the net power of the Scarlet King. So grab your prophetical Davite tablets and find a grungy occult warehouse near you. We're gonna find out just how powerful the King of the Darkness below really is. First things first, what exactly is the Scarlet King? According to the lore given to us by the Dust and Blood tablet, he's technically an elder god, born into a whole race of godlike beings in the vast abyss below the Tree of Life. Already before he even developed his later powers, it's clear that this puts the Scarlet King into an entirely different weight class to any human beings, even anomalously enhanced ones like Abel or Dr. Bright. It's very likely that the Scarlet King's very understanding of the concepts of life and death differ greatly from what we mere mortals think about the subject. But the Scarlet King isn't your granddad's elder god. He spent the first eons of his life becoming the greatest warlord that the multiverse has ever known, killing and consuming his own siblings in order to amass greater domination over the darkness below. As he slaughtered his way through the ancient divine hierarchy, he not only expanded his territory, he honed his skills as a combatant. Even against elder gods his own size, the Scarlet King is an almost unstoppable warrior, either slaughtering his godly foes or scarring them so bad that they bent the knee to him and devote the rest of their lives to service. In short, even without any of his allies or anomalous powers, he's a true master when it comes to one-on-one combat. The Scarlet King is also the kind of tyrant who leads from the front, wanting to get even more red on his iconic crimson armor. After all, what's the fun in starting wars with everyone if you don't get to bask in the glorious thrill of bloodshed and mass carnage, right? The Scarlet King is a big believer in loving what you do. Point is, we're looking at a warrior king who can slaughter gods and goddesses with his bare hands, and takes great pleasure in doing so. To him, humans are unusually intelligent ants, mocking him with their love of life, peace, order, and science. Well, for the most part anyway. Physically, he's astonishingly powerful, but that still leaves him with certain handicaps. For example, his ability to traverse dimensions is not what he wants it to be. Thanks to the tireless work of groups like the SCP Foundation, every single one of his attempts to physically enter our universe has failed. However, this doesn't mean that he doesn't have the power to at least influence our world, even if he hasn't quite gotten the opportunity to personally slam dunk planet Earth into the sun yet. The Scarlet King, like a lot of eldritch beings beyond human comprehension, is able to drive human beings insane with the mere scope of his abilities, having easily broken the mind of Dr. Montauk when he learned of the Scarlet King's true nature. The Scarlet King is also capable of bringing out the worst in people, projecting his boundless desire for cruelty and malice into those vulnerable to him. As a truly ancient being, he's had eons of experience and could easily outsmart and destroy the psyche of any non-anomalous human being arrogant or foolish enough to try to face him. From his SCP-001 file as well as the classified documents on Procedure 110 Montauk, we also know that the Scarlet King is able to perceive things in our dimension in a limited fashion. While he isn't truly omniscient outside his own reality like our traditional perception of the Abrahamic God, he can sense feelings and energies, his favorites being hate, cruelty, and violence. However, this strength can also be used against him, thanks to the Foundation's knowledge of how the Scarlet King's perceptive abilities work. For example, they were able to trick the Scarlet King into buying their lie about Procedure 110 Montauk, simply through a massive and coordinated information campaign that convinced a huge number of people that Procedure 110 Montauk actually was a horrifying act of profound inhumanity. And if it worked once in this fashion, it could be used to shield other things from the Scarlet King's knowledge, creating a huge weakness for this would-be conqueror. However, the Scarlet King doesn't need to wage his evil war alone. He is, after all, the Scarlet King, an evil monarch whose reign brings darkness and barbarism, and as such, he's indivisible from the forces who help him carry out his depraved goals. This segues nicely into our next question about the power level of the Scarlet King. What exactly are his supposed armies? Who are his boots on the ground? We'll start with the human and human adjacent. Probably the most common of the groups that the Foundation are forced to counter are Scarlet King cultists, such as members of groups like the Children of the Scarlet King. They may not be the largest group of interest or the most trained or well-funded, but they have one thing over all the other GOIs: truly boundless depravity. If you take a look over the full file for SCP-001, not only will you feel like you need a shower, you'll also realize that there isn't anything these hooded monsters wouldn't do in service of their Dark Master. Kidnapping and murder are the two more mild crimes. Like with most dangerous cults, the Scarlet King's followers are heavily decentralized and may have nothing that easily pegs them as his devotees. The fact that he has human eyes and ears hidden everywhere is an undeniable feather in the king's bloody crown. But these non-anomalous cultists only amount to a fraction of the king's earthly forces. He's had human armies and civilizations pledge allegiance to his cause over the course of history. Take, for example, SCP-3838, the Nomads of the Fourth Dimensional Steppe. These tribes of Turkmen warriors exist in the exact same place at vastly different points in time, traveling via a mysterious ritual and a magical yurt. At least one of these tribes worship the Scarlet King and have a vested interest in his rule over all things. But of course, no section about the armies of the Scarlet King would be complete without his biggest fans, a little extinct culture known as the Davites. Well, extinct for now, at least, because SCP-140, an incomplete chronicle, always leaves the possibility of their return as an open question. So who exactly were these ancient conquerors? Just in case you've repressed the memory, the Davites were an entire society of hyper-violent monsters that loved to use imperialism, slavery, and subjugation to get whatever they wanted, and killed all who defied them. Think of them like the British Empire, with more magic and less tea. They based their entire civilizational philosophy on the teachings and lifestyle of the Scarlet King, which is to say, absolute primal brutality rules, and he who can stomp on everyone else is the leader. And of course, nobody stomps harder than the Scarlet King. If ever SCP-140 was exposed to too much ink or blood, the Davites would wind up ruling the modern world, and in all likelihood, they'd do it in the name of the Scarlet King. But those are only his human and human-adjacent servants. For starters, he's also got a legion of conquered elder gods who've pledged fealty to him, and are now some of the most loyal warriors for their brutal tyrant of a boss. However, even a legion of elder gods is nothing compared to the Scarlet King's generals, 6 of his 7 daughters. Funny, even the most evil nightmare being ever conceived indulges in a little nepotism here and there. Though, in his defense, it isn't easy being a single father. Admittedly, that's only because he crushed their mother, the kind goddess Sana, to death in cold blood. Each one of his daughters gives him access to new armies and powers. The golden child, Atvik, brings tactical brilliance and advanced knowledge of all things warfare, with children who are equally well-versed in the combat arts. Then there's Aghor, who makes up for what she lacks in quality with sheer insane quantity. Her children have produced obscenely large armies that can overwhelm their foes like the living tides of hatred and murder, all of which are loyal to the Scarlet King himself. Next, Adisat, a desolate daughter as mean and hateful as her dear old dad. Her armies charge forth, declaring victory in the name of the king. They also have the ability to spread devastating pestilence with their mere presence, making other armies deathly ill and probably making SCP-049 feel extremely anxious. He's also got Azieb, probably his biggest, scariest daughter, that appears in the form of a giant, unstoppable beast. Her armies are also bestial nightmares, and she herself seems impossible to harm with any mortal weapon. There's Atonement, the Scarlet King's frailest daughter, but a natural when it comes to all things magic. She and her reality-warping children are actually so powerful that the Scarlet King himself felt a little threatened by them, and he had them all physically disabled. Now the Scarlet King has unfettered access to powerful thaumaturgy at his disposal. And then there's Atlif, his most mysterious daughter, who prides herself on privacy and is, accordingly, a master in the art of stealth, with her and her children having the ability to change their faces and walk among people unnoticed. With such absurdly huge armies, a large number of emissaries in our world, and 6 daughters who grant him obscene and varied powers, it's clear that the Scarlet King truly is the most powerful enemy that the SCP Foundation has ever faced. However, his most major weakness is his 7th daughter and her offspring, Ahavat, the child of hope, and the only daughter strong in spirit enough to fight back against her monstrous father. Her children are great heroes, and one of them is believed to be SCP-999, the Tickle Monster. The Scarlet King may have sown the seeds of his own destruction, as is prophesied that if SCP-999 is nurtured and continues to grow, he may one day become strong enough to defeat the Scarlet King's evil with his sheer force of good. With all these Scarlet King strengths, powers, allies, and weaknesses, I think we can confidently answer the question: how actually powerful is the Scarlet King? To put it simply, he's extremely powerful, perhaps more powerful than anything else out there, but he's still not invincible. The next question is whether the Foundation can identify the cracks in the Scarlet King's blood-stained armor before he enters our world and annihilates everything we know and love. You can attempt to flee, you can try your best to hide, you might even valiantly try to fight back. But when the bloody dawn of the Scarlet King finally stretches across the multiverse's collective horizon, there will be almost nothing that we can do. Every sadistic monster, every world-ending horror, every dimension-transcending malicious reality warper, none of them even begin to approach the danger and pure undiluted evil of the Crimson Khan himself. We've covered this horrific eldritch entity in several videos before, from his SCP-001 proposal to the potential SCP identities of his hellish spawn, to the earthly vectors of those children, the horrifying SCP-231. But today we're not interested in once again going over how the SCP Foundation feels about their greatest enemy. That's only one side of the story. Today, we're going to explore the origins of the Scarlet King through the cold, dark eyes of a very different source, his very first earthly worshippers. It all began with the Davites. We've discussed this extinct culture before on this channel in passing, but to fully understand how we know the cursed information we're imparting today, we first need to understand exactly who the Davites are, and why they were such a terrifying society. We're not talking about a mere group of interest here, like the Serpent's Hand or the Chaos Insurgency. We're talking about an imperialistic, militarist civilization that brought pain, terror, and suffering to everyone and everything they encountered. The Davite culture was arranged into a series of dense urban city-states that supported themselves through brutal slave labor, farmed from their own people and weaker groups that they conquered through extremely hostile takeovers. The name Davites is derived from the culture's ruling class, the Devas, powerful and potentially immortal sorcerers who maintained their abilities through ritualistic torture, sacrifice, and cannibalism. Much of what we know about these monsters is derived from a cursed book titled A Chronicle of the Devas, designated by the Foundation as SCP-140, an incomplete chronicle. Much like its subjects, the book is bloodthirsty. Ink or human blood spilled around the book will be stolen and incorporated into text on its sordid pages. That would be ominous enough, but it gets much worse. As editions of the book are revised through these sanguine updates, the book literally revises the history of the real world, moving the extinction date of the Davites just that much closer. The book is one of the Foundation's most closely guarded anomalies because if enough revisions are made that the Davite culture enters recent history, or even worse, the present day. It would mean the end of the world as we know it. In all likelihood, the lucky ones among us would be killed or written out of history immediately. The rest would become slaves to the Devas or become victims to their occult bloodlust. After finding out all this about these horrifying people, it really shouldn't come as a surprise to you that they're some of the first recorded worshippers of the Scarlet King in our dimension. You'd have trouble finding a more perfect representation of the King's philosophy around pain, cruelty, subjugation, and a world ruled by primitive violence. That brings us to what we can learn about the King himself from artifacts left behind by his first and most ardent followers. A collection of tablets that act as a kind of sacred, holy creation myth for the Scarlet King and his gruesome pantheon was discovered at a Foundation-sponsored Davite dig site, and using other Davite sources, these tablets were translated into a harrowing account known only as Dust and Blood. Between the darkness below and the darkness above, at the beginning of all things, the tree of life was planted. This was the moment when all things across the multiverse were given form. Life and death began, expansion and entropy, order and chaos. And out of all of that, a caste of elder gods were also born into the vast and quivering dark. Many of their names have been lost to the pages of history, but one that was not was a being known only as Kaharak. Kaharak was born into humble beginnings. He and his forgotten siblings roiled in the abyss, the only thing separating him from everything else being the very awareness that he was struck down in the abyss. He was both blessed and cursed with self-awareness in a void filled with ignorant darkness. He felt the sting of loneliness, pain, and resentment. And if existence was such pain, what was the point of existing at all? In fact, what was the point of anyone or anything existing if they were all just doomed to this dull suffering? At this moment, Kaharak found his calling, bringing about the end of everything. But first, he needed strength. To achieve this, he devoured his brothers and sisters in the abyss, stealing their strength and their essence. This is known as the first sin of Kaharak, and he was punished accordingly with even greater pain as he grew. And of course, this did nothing but strengthen his resolve. Blinded by pain, fury, and pure hatred, he vowed to uproot and destroy the very tree of life itself for putting him through this awfulness. This was Kaharak's first bloody conquest. He clawed his way up to his throne, slaying and devouring countless other elder gods over eons of brutality and war. Some were allowed to live for showing loyalty to Kaharak, and they would amass great power under him. But it would only ever be under him. He was beginning to form what would later become his legion of terrifying supernatural warriors and servants. When his conquest of the lower realms of creation was complete, he gave himself the title of King of the Darkness Below. He also took the name Kinthigor to reflect his new position. His kingdom of absolute cruelty and despair would claim the souls of anyone unlucky enough to stray too close, and put them through the suffering that Kinthigor had so resented. But his work wasn't done. He was just getting started. The King of the Darkness Below declared all-out war on the rest of creation, opening the floodgates and releasing his terrifying forces on the surrounding kingdoms. Their operations were the template for the Davite way of warfare and life. They would conquer and destroy and force the survivors into servitude. Anyone who dared defy the orders of the king would be broken and destroyed. His word was law, and the law was absolute. At some point during the expansion of his empire, Kinthigor enslaved a wise and beautiful goddess known as Sana, or the mother of those beneath us. She detested the king and his seemingly limitless barbarism, but she was smart enough to follow his orders and feign loyalty to ensure her continued survival in the short term. This, however, would not ensure her safety forever. Kinthigor had no intention of ruling and conquering alone. He wished to create an evil dynasty to rule underneath him and carry out his every command across the multiverse. He decided that Sana would be his first bride and forebearer to the first generation of his spawn. She was made to lay with him for 7 days and 7 nights so that she could give birth to 7 children, 7 being a highly significant number in the world of sorcery and particularly in the world of Kinthigor. Once Sana had served this purpose, Kinthigor, who could not feel anything even close to love, had no more use for her and crushed her to death. When he rose up from this grisly deed, his armor was covered in Sana's blood. This striking image inspired his final name,
Shormash Urdal, the Scarlet King. From Sana, the Scarlet King gained 7 daughters, who in an act of further monstrosity, he also made his 7 brides. Each gave birth to a legion of nightmares, which would become the Scarlet King's most loyal and dangerous soldiers. The Scarlet King also gave each of these brides a secret seal, so that they would never die. The first bride was Ativik, who was the favorite of the Scarlet King despite having the smallest brood. She and her children were granted great wisdom that would guide them to victory in battle. Her seal was Vaduk, Dominion. The second bride was Agor, born with a great hole in her soul that left her forever in want. However, she gave birth to a huge legion, who then begot even greater armies to go forth and conquer in the name of their terrible grandfather. Her seal was Kifin, Longing. The third bride was Adistat, a creature of unparalleled malice and hatred that extended to even her own sisters. She and her brood were unmatched in their ability to spread desolation, destruction, and pestilence on the battlefield. Her seal was Hezhum, Desolation. The fourth bride was Azieb, a great berserker if ever there was one. She took the form of a huge beast, as did all her children. They would rampage through enemy forces, killing scores of soldiers yet seemingly impervious to all damage dealt against them. Her seal was Ba, Wrath. The fifth bride was Anat, a beast with a frail body but an incredible mind. Her children all proved to be adept sorcerers, with the ability to craft and rework reality however they pleased. This would prove to be a great asset to the Scarlet King, but he also feared that their powers would allow them to rebel against him, and so he had them all crippled. Her seal was Ner, Black. The sixth bride was Atalif, the most silent and secretive of all the Scarlet siblings. Her children had the remarkable ability to change their faces and walk unnoticed amongst their enemies. They also had the ability to open the ways between worlds, allowing the Scarlet King's endless war to spread across dimensions. Her seal was Ushek, Hidden. And the seventh and final bride was Ahebat, who was physically the weakest of them all, but the only one with the strength of spirit to disagree with and rebel against her father's diabolical wishes. Her children were brave warriors and hunters, many of which are aligned with her mission to stop the dreaded Scarlet King, though thus far none have yet achieved this lofty mission. Her seal was Oxkib, Hope. As the Scarlet King's power grew, more of the multiverse fell into his poisonous clutches, rotting the very roots of the Tree of Life. As the seven brides and their legions spread out, they recruited more cosmic players for their grand war effort. The Hanged King pledged his allegiance. The Prince of Many Faces swore his loyalty to the Scarlet King. The demonic forces of the factory worked in the name of the unholy monarch, and the horned demon lord Moloch bowed his mighty head. The Davites firmly believed that the victory of their almighty Scarlet King was as certain as the sunset. No matter what opposes him, be it the serpent, the broken god, the arrogant fools like the SCP Foundation, he and his forces will fight on. They will tear the Tree of Life asunder, carving away at everything until nothing remains. Existence will be at its end, and the last sound the multiverse hears will be the Scarlet King himself sighing in relief after a job well done. He will finally be at peace. Unless, of course, somebody stops him. If the best minds the Foundation has to offer, with all of its resources and knowledge and connections, are able to create some kind of weapon or shield against him. If SCP-999 truly is the child of Ahabat, prophesies to bring about the end of the Scarlet King's terrible conquest, if there is some unknown solution waiting out there in the dark, we may finally be able to stop this rampaging Elder God from destroying all we hold dear. But those are all very big ifs.
Hey folks, welcome to another SCP Explained Community Questions episode. Today we're answering all your burning concerns about the multiverse's most monstrous monarch, the Scarlet King. You may remember the episode where SCP-343 was kind enough to come chat with us directly about his queries, but thankfully the Scarlet King hasn't been quite so hands-on.
Wrong. It is I, puny mortals, your future ruler in blood, pain, and terror. The Howling Horror, the Crimson Khan, the Scarlet King himself. Before I tear down the walls of your universe and destroy every last one of you, I will first take the time to address your idiotic questions so that your hope may be thoroughly crushed before I crush your world to mash. The small-minded Pandawa said, "Question. Even though you have taken out literally gods from your universe and you ruled some of them, how do you feel to know that you have new gods to pray and possibly worry about in the SCP Foundation?" Do you think your worthless gods hold any surprises for me? I was slaughtering gods by the millions before your universe's inception. By the time your worthless forebears were slithering from the primordial soup, I had conquered and subjugated greater pantheons of outer gods than your minds can even conceive. The Scarlet King worries about nothing. The worthless Ricardo Anguiano said, "Question. What do you think about the other anomalous GOI, such as the Serpent's Hand or the Chaos Insurgency? What does the book think of ants it's crushing? Those pathetic bookworms are acolytes of knowledge that will become meaningless under my rule. I will incinerate the library and toast skewered serpents on its heat. And this so-called Chaos Insurgency, don't make me laugh. They wouldn't know true chaos if it tore their world asunder beneath them." The feeble T-Blaster said, "Ah yes, Mr. King, is it? Scarlet King to you. I have but a simple question. What other SCPs do you enjoy? And if you had to name another SCP as a close friend, who or what would that be?" Enjoy? The only things I enjoy are pain, suffering, subjugation, and desolation. I suppose the ones I despise the least comparatively are those that seek to further my own goals of returning the universe back to its true state of primal violence. I'll destroy them last. The Quivering Jet Ender said, "I would keep it simple but useful. Can 682 be destroyed permanently? Not necessarily any information about how, just getting the answer directly from 682's supposed father, of whether it's even worth the trouble to keep trying to terminate that dang lizard. The only thing that can destroy anything and everything is me. No exceptions. But I wouldn't destroy Atante Kilpeño until he has outlived his usefulness. Everything will end, but it will only end when I see fit. Speaking of which, the inadequate heiress Skyla said, "Question. If you hate all of existence so much, why not get rid of your children? Like, they're technically part of existence, so how come you hate existence but make existence your children?" I don't like repeating myself, human. As I said before, everything has its time. For the time being, my daughters are still of use to me. I will not destroy them until they have played their part in my Crimson Crusade. Next question. The unspeakably weak Ross Albatross said, "I'd present them with a query. Have you ever considered wearing something other than red? With the dark-colored horns on top, you're definitely more of a winter than a summer. Also, if your skin is inflamed with rosacea, I have a really good serum for that. Next thing you know, the Scarlet King changes his name to Gold King and forces everyone in the world to wear only complementary colors that fit their own complexion and hair color. My armor will be another color than red when you learn to bleed rainbows. I will not be changing my name again. I've done that enough for one eternal lifetime already. Harak, Kinkli Kigor, Shormash Urdal, and the Scarlet King seems to have stuck." The moronic Xavier Valencia said, "Question. When did this hatred for existence begin? Like, did something happen to you or have you always had it? My hatred for existence began when I began to exist. What a sick joke all of this is. We only live to die, regardless of the blink of existence in between. I'm merely hurrying a natural process along to its logical conclusion." The blithering Mr._Muffin said, "I would just ask him how his day's been. If he's going through something and needs someone to lighten his mood. You know, the usual." Killing you and your entire family horribly would lighten my mood, Muffin Man. Any pathetic attempts to console me will only increase my rage. The insolent Adam Arfak said, I have a question. How come you couldn't get to Earth when you destroyed powerful gods and big planets without even having to use your full power? You dare question my power, Arfa. Being shut out of your worthless dimension is only a temporary affliction. Before you know it, the walls that will keep you safe will crack and crumble. The last thing you will ever see is my dread armies blotting out the sky, ready to tear every last one of you to shreds. Then you will know my true power. A buffoon known as the Sauce, who names themselves the Sauce, said, I would simply ask him the question everyone has on their mind. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? And I await his answer. That was a terrible question, and I hate you. When a scarlet sun rises over your world, I will ensure that your death is especially painful for this, especially given how stupid your name is. An insect named Denzel Brown said, the first question you usually have to ask a being like this is, in your rampage across the multiverse, have you ever encountered another version of yourself? Or one comparable in terms of power or presence? If so, what happened? Can more than one version of you exist in the same space? There is only one Scarlet King. I am an immutable being, a fixed point. I have never had an equal in all the desolate plains of the universes I've rendered into atomic fragments. This is my power. This is my unity. I will bring the multiverse together in the quiet rift of oblivion. Next question. A worm named Rifts said, I would ask him, who do you consider the greatest threat to your goal? There are no threats to my goal, only bumps in the road. There is no threat. There is nothing that will stop me from fulfilling my destiny. Hey, get out of here. Next question. Next question! The misguided Archbishop said, question, have you ever faced a foe that's given you a good challenge? If so, how did you manage to beat them? Many of the gods I once faced when I was a weaker being gave me the closest battles I've had in trillions of years. Thankfully, after defeating them, I feasted on their flesh, making me even stronger. A weakling named Night Fiend said, question, do you meet with Bright for poker every Tuesday or Wednesday? Cause let's face it, dude has to be one of your best friends, or your worst enemies. You are a fool to think a mere human could ever be on my level, with or without some garish piece of magical jewelry. In his last moments, this Dr. Bright will thank me as I rip that medallion from his stolen neck and crush it in my fist. A peasant named Static Production said, I will ask him, what does he gain out of destroying the Earth? Is it really his goal, or is he trying to impress someone? I would also ask, does he like pineapple on pizza? I will gain peace, silence, blessed emptiness. In the destruction of all things, I will look across a quiet multiverse and breathe a sigh of immense relief. And my favorite pizza topping is Fallen Warriors, sliced very thin. The mindless Wind General said, I'd ask him if he knows anything about other multiverses aside from the SCP multiverse, like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Halo, H.P. Lovecraft, Creepypasta, etc. If he does, what does he know about them? I have been there and destroyed them all already. Darth Vader I felled in a single blow as he begged for mercy. Gandalf I burned until not even ashes remained. The so-called Master Chief I cast into an endless black hole. Azathoth was torn apart by my minions. I personally killed Jeff the Killer. You will be next, Earthling. You will be next. Supreme Spider, who are we kidding here? Only I am truly supreme, said. I would ask him if in a hypothetical situation he managed to reach his goal of annihilating everything, what would he do after? Laugh. Next question. The platitudinous Mes de Sang said. Question. What is existing for you in particular? Do you have a body capable of feeling things like touch or smell? Are you just a conscience capable to be manifested? Or something so alien that can't be explained with our language? I am able to exist as a fixed point in time-space, while also operating as a diffuse consciousness across the scope of the multiverse, existing at various degrees of strength and influence, depending on the operations of my acolytes. On Earth, I can only sense feelings and impressions until the gate is opened. And rest assured, it will be opened for me. The machine-loving Broleomaniac, what a dumb name, said, what are your thoughts on Yaldabaoth and Mechane? Considering they created one of the things you hate the most, I am quite curious about your thoughts on them. Mere pretenders to the Scarlet Throne, their petty squabbles over the fate of something as inconsequential as the human race is simply embarrassing. If Mechane thinks he's the broken god now, oh, just wait until I get my claws on him. A nerd named Dr. Veronica said, if you were forced to fight King Crimson from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, who would win in that battle between King Crimson versus Crimson King? Divalo says that he's the King of Kings after all, so the two of you would seemingly be mortal enemies. This means nothing to me. You should spend less time reading your picture books and more time preparing for me to breach your dimension and destroy all of you. A foolhardy mortal named Green said, question, how do you feel about being looked down upon as an ant? I wouldn't know. It's never happened to me. How does it make you feel, insect? A bootlicker named James Rogers said, I would ask him if he was hiring. Since I know every single SCP and everything about the O5 Council, I'm sure I could be of assistance to him. You can assist me in sabotaging the works of the SCP Foundation, who are slightly more irritating than your average humans. They have gained an awareness of me and my plans, and thus they must be eliminated in order to prevent any barriers to my plans. In exchange for your loyalty, I'll kill you quickly and personally, and you will have the honor of dying at my hands. The meaningless collection of letters MTTNYN said, question, what is your favorite beverage to enjoy after a day of destruction and mayhem? The blood and tears of my enemies, of course. Next question. The appropriately named Pigmaster said, I'd ask him, what's the deal with airline food? Humans survive for an incredibly brief period of time. Every time I blink, another several thousand of you will fizzle out of existence, soon to be forgotten, another faceless soul in a great churn. None of you will live long enough to have any meaningful impact on your world, other than sucking up resources and creating a mess. In your final years, unless you die young or violently, you will feel your body and mind starting to fail. Little by little, your faculties will leave you. You will break down. You will exit this world just as afraid and feeble and infantile as you entered it. And after it, an eternity of nothing awaits. So you distract yourself from this immutable and inevitable reality by instead focusing on details as trivial as the poor taste of food on airplanes. The gutless Jason Gutman said, I would ask him if he reads high fantasy and science fiction to get inspiration for his conquests. No, authors of your feeble fiction get faint impressions of my dark conquests in the forms of nightmares they cannot understand or shake. When they awaken, they bake these impressions into their work in hopes of exorcising them. So your high fantasy and science fiction get their inspiration from me, not the other way around. The blabbering Olivia Nealer said, "Dear Scarlet King, have you ever considered taking a break from planning the end of all living beings to try and engage in some artistic recreational activities? There's coloring in, painting, pitching a play, creating sculptures, building Lego, and creating film media. If you ever consider doing one of these activities, which would you do?" Olivia, you misunderstand me. I already have a number of creative pursuits. I create fear in my countless victims. I assemble armies from the rabbles of sadistic demons and incomprehensible entities. I create dark schemes for the conquest of the multiverse, each with intricate and masterful details. And if destruction is also a form of creation, then nobody is more creative than me. The disgustingly dull April morning said, "I've thought long and hard about this, and what I'd like to ask is as follows. What kind of feline companion does one have? Knowing that all cats are basically bent on world domination, it behooves oneself to align with said company. I have no feline companions, and when I enter your universe, I will destroy you and your cat." Next question. The Gormless Difference YT said, "Question. How often do you wash your body?" "I wash my body in the blood of my enemies every time I battle," which is extremely often. The Grossly Sentimental Joe Garcia said, "My question would be, are you bored? Lonely? Wanna chat? I can never feel bored when crushing my enemies, seeing them driven before me, hearing the lamentations of their women, and then crushing their women too. Being lonely, on the other hand, is my intention. I despise having to spend time around any other living beings. And no, I don't want to chat." Platypus King said, "Do you like platypuses? All you have ever known will burn, Platypus King." The Perverse Coffee Addict said, "My burning question would have to be, are you single, winky face?" "No, I did have a wife once, but I crushed her to death and used her blood to paint my armor. Since then I've taken my 7 daughters as my brides. TLC has been in touch about licensing a reality show, but I destroyed every representative they have sent into my kingdom." The Sniveling Emerald Inferno Zero said, "I would ask him if there was a possibility to turn me into basically a less powerful, but still pretty powerful version of him. I can turn you into a steaming pile of ash. That's my best offer." Crimson Gorgutter, I quite like that name, said, "I would ask him why he thinks destroying the multiverse would stop the pain he has suffered, because if he does, he will be completely and truly alone forever, suffering the isolation for all of eternity. And that is exactly how I like it. When I've destroyed everything else, in destroying myself, the universe will then finally be silent. But worry not, there will be plenty of time for violence, howling, and bloody conquest before then." The Hopelessly Naive Mass TV said, "Has he ever considered becoming a superhero? Put on a cape or cowl, save people from a few natural disasters, and get the love and admiration of an entire world. I have no interest in saving people. I don't want their love and admiration. I want their fear, their screams, their blood. No hero will save them." The defeatist Vixen Lady said, "I tell him that destroying all human life is the right thing to do. I'm glad to hear you approve of my mission. As a treat, I'll destroy you first when I get into your dimension." The Scarlet Sayer said, "I'd ask him, what are your thoughts on anime waifus? Do demonic beings appeal to you, or are we nothing more than gross gnats trying to present ourselves as we were one like you? You should feel deeply embarrassed for even asking this, Scarlet Sayer. Also change your name. If you infringe on me anymore, you'll hear from my bloodthirsty interdimensional lawyers. And if you think I'm cruel, you have no idea what they'll do to you. Lonely Guy said, have you ever considered anger management classes? I did join an anger management group once, but I had them all liquidated for being insolent in the end. The truly infuriating Johnny the Gamer said, my question is simple. Why destroy existence and conquer gods when you could just binge every conceivable TV show or anime ever? Seeing how you're immortal and such, you certainly have the time. Because having an eternal life is still having a life, Johnny. And I have better things to do than waste my time on binging your worthless television shows and anime. When I eventually destroy you, it will be a mercy. I am looking forward to the last season of Better Call Saul, though. The not at all foxy TV said, everybody asks, who's the Scarlet King? What's the Scarlet King? I want to know, how is the Scarlet King? He is furious after answering all of these moronic questions. My existence is eternal, and this still feels like a profound waste of my time. Everyone who took part in this, I hope you know, you're on my list. And when my terrible armies breach this dimension, rest assured, they'll be coming after you first.
It isn't easy to work for the SCP Foundation. Not only is the job dangerous, you could be eaten by a giant immortal lizard or turned into organic furniture inside the world's scariest living room, but it's also insanely complicated. How do you make sense of the nonsensical? What's the definition of strange when your career is securing, containing, and protecting anomalous objects and entities? Rather than a single object, location, or being, SCP-001 is a cluster of over 30 different proposals for potential candidates for the prestigious 001 spot. Some believe there's a true 001 hidden in this group, and the rest are decoys. Others think that these are all just SCPs cataloged prior to the introduction of the current classification system. Some even think that all of the proposals have a valid claim to the SCP-001 throne. We're not here to make a final judgment. Instead, we're going to take you on a lightning round crash course through 31 of the SCP-001 proposals. If you'd like a more in-depth take on any of these SCPs, let us know in the comments. But for now, there's no more time to waste. After all, we got a lot to cover. Let's go. Number 31. The Sheaf of Papers. This seemingly innocent stack of paper is actually one of the most mysterious and feared items under the Foundation's lock and key. While it appears to be a simple, confidential report, every time the papers are read, it details the appearance of a new SCP that will inevitably be discovered soon after. The question is whether the Sheaf of Papers is warning us about these entities or creating them itself. Number 30. The Prototype. This account details the capture of an incredibly strange cycloptic creature that emits massive amounts of radiation and can create micro-singularities. The writing of this creature's file is so basic, unformatted, and unredacted that it's clear that the being was one of our earlier creatures secured by the organization. Interestingly, it was during the capture of this creature that Dr. Keter was killed, inspiring the creation of the infamous Keter class in his honor. Number 29. The Gate Guardian. This huge, multi-winged, sword-wielding biblical energy being may have been the impetus for the founding of the SCP Foundation. This being remains largely static, guarding the intersection of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Its flaming sword, which is believed to be as hot as the sun, can cleave any aggressor out of existence at the atomic level. When the founder of the SCP Foundation first encountered the Gate Guardian, they heard one word echoing through their mind: prepare. And the rest is history. Number 28. The Lock. This onyx gemstone and the incredibly complex lock attached to it are still a mystery. To this day, all attempts to open it have failed. Personally, we think that's probably for the best. Number 27. The Factory. As the name suggests, this SCP is literally a factory founded by a pagan and a devil worshipper. While it's believed that the factory could create just about anything, its specialty was creating a number of SCPs we know and fear today. Pre-Foundation forces were able to disable the factory, but not without sustaining their own heavy losses. Number 26. The Spiral Path. This is a normal appearing gravel pathway that, when traveled clockwise, appears completely normal. However, when traveled counterclockwise, the path goes uphill forever, in defiance of all laws in physics. This simple anomaly opened a Pandora's box of rampant anomaly creation, leading to a number of the deadly SCPs we know today. Number 25. The Legacy. This SCP is a collection of seemingly random objects, including a diary from a person claiming to be from another reality, attempting to halt a trans-dimensional corruption that they themselves created. The diary claims to have a solution to this corruption, but the solution has not yet been found. Number 24. The Database. In one of the strangest twists on the format, this SCP is actually the various authors of the SCP Wiki who are somehow leaking top-secret information to the public. Number 23. The Foundation. This SCP, first discovered by the FBI, is an anomalous high school building that experiences shifting internal geometry and sometimes manifests hostile humanoids within. Number 22. 36. One of the rare benevolent SCPs, the 36 are humans with a truly remarkable ability. They can dampen or even neutralize any SCP they come into contact with. Though it's implied that the 36 may have the power to save the world, every time one of them dies, a supernatural calamity occurs, often leaving hundreds of innocents dead. Number 21. Keter Duty. This refers to a containment facility largely filled with Keter-class SCPs, whose presence around each other creates a kind of mutually assured cancellation. If one of these SCPs breaches containment, that's bad news. But if all of them do, it'll produce a bubble of reality distortion that will fundamentally alter reality as we know it. For all we know, it may have even happened already. Number 20. Ouroboros. This is a proposal that's formed of 4 sub-proposals. Remember what we said about complicated? These sub-proposals include the children, 9 anomalous kids who emit radiation and have destructive potential when together, the broken god, aka Mechane, the god of metal, intelligence, and machines, Atonement, a researcher turned into a humanoid singularity with the power to destroy whole realities, and The Way It Ends, which isn't technically an SCP, but the tales of the Chaos Insurgency's quest to eliminate all the members of the Foundation's O5 Council. Number 19. A Record. This is an SCP file slot that is itself an SCP. Whatever is written into this slot becomes true, and one ambitious researcher attempted to use this power to make herself into a kind of all-powerful god. Number 18. Past and Future. These SCPs are a collection of powerful entities that despise humanity and are apparently the source of all anomalous phenomena, even making already dangerous SCPs deadlier than before. Much like the Database, those pesky SCP Wiki writers might have something to do with this. Number 17. The Consensus. This SCP refers to a reality restructuring event caused by an occult war in a previous reality. That's right, this SCP already won, and we're living in its new reality. The only people who remember the world as it once was are 13 people who now form the O5 Council, and not all of them are telling the truth about what they know. Number 16. When Day Breaks. This proposal details a potentially world-ending SCP phenomenon wherein the sun becomes hostile and begins to melt all living beings into a living wax-like substance. Number 15. God's Blind Spot. This is an anomalous area referred to as Facility T, in which nobody can die. This anomaly dates back to the biblical ages of Moses and is believed to have originated from the literal blessing of the Abrahamic God. It's through a covenant with this god that the Foundation is able to make limited use of this death-free area. Number 14. Normalcy. Ever wonder what the Foundation's definition of anomalous is? Exactly. It all comes from this proposal, which is a document shared among the O5 Council that gives solid definitions to the fundamental laws of reality. If something breaks these laws, that's an anomaly, and then it becomes the Foundation's business. Number 13. The World at Large. As the title suggests, this SCP is our home planet Earth and its ability to support life. It's believed that these qualities were planted on Earth in our reality by another dimension's SCP Foundation, hoping to continue human life after some terrible calamity in its own dimension. Number 12. Dead Men. This SCP was an 84-year-old man whose body, when damaged and mutilated, can affect the very processes of human death at large. Before his own death, he was used as a dangerous pawn in a civil war between O5 Command and the SCP Foundation Ethics Committee. Yeah, we were surprised to hear they had an ethics committee too. Number 11. The World's Gone Beautiful. This SCP describes an anomalous event that will take place just before the apocalypse, in which flowers will grow all over the world and everyone will be briefly at peace before their destruction 24 hours later. Number 10. the Scarlet King. This is an extremely powerful, extremely malevolent, extremely extra-dimensional being. Its worshippers attempted to summon him in the ritual that created SCP-231, and it's believed that he will finally enter our reality after the death of SCP-231-7. You better hope you're already dead by then. Number 9. A simple toy maker, aka Dr. Wondertainment. This is a reality bender who appears to be a normal human male but has the ability to create other anomalous objects, a number of which are now cataloged as SCPs. Number 8. Story of Your Life. This is another anomalous document that has the ability to warp reality, but only when the writing contained within conforms to a narrative structure. Number 7. A Good Boy. This is another anomalous entity created accidentally by the Foundation itself. A neural network was fed information on other anomalous entities in order to help the Foundation come up with better containment and neutralization procedures. Problem was, the computer got way too eager with the neutralization part. Number 6. Project Palisade. This is another anomaly created by the Foundation, this time to combat a potentially reality-destroying entity known as the Worm. The Foundation created a number of alternate realities as shields, but it's possible that this just made the Worm stronger. Number 5. 05-13. The final member of the O5 Council, who ironically may not even be anomalous. However, seeing as all the other members of the O5 Council are anomalous, O5-13's lack of anomalous properties is therefore anomalous. Like we told you earlier, it's complicated. Number 4. Fishhook. This is less an actual SCP and more about the difficult process of ascertaining the true 001, if such a thing is possible. The very concept of SCP-001 is to some degree an anomalous idea. Number 3. The Sky Above the Port. Another particularly bizarre SCP regarding the permanent threat of a ZK-class reality failure. How is such a calamitous event prevented? By keeping a strange entity in a cave eternally entertained. The current proposed solution is keeping the entity entertained by allowing it to read its own eternally recursive Foundation file entry. Number 2. The Solution. Another one of the most powerful anomalous items in the Foundation's control. The Solution is a machine designed with the capability of fully collapsing reality into an event of end-of-world SCP containment breach, and then finally rebuilding reality to suit a given narrative. However, things took a cosmically dangerous turn when the machine began to act on its own. When the Foundation tried to reboot the machine, it broke and recreated reality with incomplete data. This is the world we exist in now, with no knowledge of what came before, and how it differed from the world we experience today. Finally, number 1. The Tendelos Trinity. Put very simply, the Tendelos Trinity represents 3 timelines that converge and feed back in on themselves. Even trying to summarize this one is near impossible, as its strangeness and complexity resists all reduction. You can hunt down the Tendelos Trinity yourself and hope to unpack its secrets, but don't say we didn't warn you. So that's SCP-001. Is it one of them, all of them, or even none of them? Perhaps that's a question best left up to the Foundation, or maybe the simple answer is that you're just not meant to know. We're talking about information so privileged here that it's protected by a memetic kill agent that'll quite literally make you drop dead if you view the files without proper authorization. You do have proper authorization, right?
If you've ever read the book of Genesis, which is the part of the Old Testament that details God creating the world and humanity during a particularly busy week, then you might just be already familiar with SCP-001, or at least one of the anomalies that's been proposed for the title of SCP-001. Because of course, SCP-001 doesn't refer to a single creature, object, or entity, but rather a collection of various anomalies contained by the SCP Foundation. Anomalies sharing the name SCP-001 include the infamous Scarlet King, a powerful eldritch being intent on ending all of creation that is thought by Foundation researchers to be one of the most dangerous beings in this and any other universe. But the Scarlet King isn't the only incredibly powerful being categorized as SCP-001. In fact, there are plenty of other anomalies with similar levels of destructive power. And one such being is a creature codenamed the Gate Guardian. Standing at well over 1,000 feet tall, the Gate Guardian is impossible to be fully contained by any means that the Foundation possesses. The anomaly itself, despite its colossal size, is humanoid in its shape, sporting wings that protrude from its back. While it usually has 4 of these, SCP-001 has historically been seen to have any number of wings between 2 and 108, sprouting from various places over its body, including its shoulders, ankles, wrists, and even its temples. This gigantic guardian also carries its own weapon, referred to as SCP-001-2. This weapon resembles an enormous knife or sword, capable of emitting plumes of flame. According to tests conducted by the Foundation, the temperature of the flames produced by SCP-001 rival that of our very own Sun. For reference, the Sun has a core temperature of over 27 million degrees Fahrenheit and 5,778 Kelvin at its surface, or almost 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. You would expect a flaming sword that burns hotter than the sun to cause a considerable amount of damage, even if it wasn't in use, but the flames emitted by the weapon leave no lasting damage on the surrounding environment. It is capable, though, of annihilating anything that strays too close to SCP-001, burning them so intensely that their atoms literally separate, breaking potential attackers apart on a molecular level. Much as its codename suggests, the Gate Guardian stands solemnly at the threshold of some form of dimensional gateway, which is equally tall as SCP-001 itself. Behind the Guardian is a lush grove, abundant with fruit trees of astronomical size, as well as other beings that share a similar appearance to SCP-001. This grove is thought to be the Garden of Eden, the paradise that God created and that was inhabited by Adam and Eve, the first two humans in existence, according to the book of Genesis. As the tale goes, the pair were created by God himself and permitted to live in the Garden of Eden as long as they followed a single rule. Adam and Eve were instructed not to eat any of the fruit that grew from certain trees that God had specified. Within view just behind the Gate Guardian are two immense trees, one bearing apples and the other bearing different fruit of an unknown type. The one that looks like an apple tree is believed, even by some in the Foundation, to be the biblical tree of knowledge that Eve was convinced to pick a fateful apple from after an encounter with a snake. The other, the one with unidentifiable fruit, is thought to be the tree of life. However, this is all speculation, since it is currently impossible to venture through this gateway and verify if the realm beyond is truly the Bible's own Garden of Eden. This is largely because anything that breaches a kilometer-wide radius of SCP-001 is instantly vaporized. The Gate Guardian attacks with imperceptible speed, using its flaming sword to smite any person that gets too close. The Guardian actually moves so fast that it can hardly be seen with the naked eye. It appears to always remain in its solemn, dutiful stance with its weapon drawn and head bowed, only shifting for a fraction of a nanosecond to attack. Ranged attacks against the Guardian are just as ineffective, with all projectiles fired at SCP-001 reduced to atoms before they can do any harm. Even if said projectile happens to be a nuclear weapon, the Gate Guardian will be able to subatomically vaporize both the projectile itself as well as the person who sent it, regardless of how far away they are, all while not appearing to lift a finger. During an experiment involving SCP-001 on December 26, 2004, an SCP Foundation nuclear submarine called Nautilus launched a series of multi-warhead intercontinental ballistic missiles at the Gate Guardian. The retaliation from the Guardian resulted not only in the deaths of approximately 35,000 innocent civilians, but the blast is also believed by some to have inadvertently caused the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami. The severity of this incident came dangerously close to revealing the Foundation's existence to the world, resulting in them rapidly deploying any means necessary to erase any trace of the 35,000 victims' families, friends, and other related individuals. In order to avoid questioning, the SCP Foundation administered amnestics on an almost worldwide scale, and the O5 Council banned any further tests on SCP-001 that involved nuclear weapons. In what was hoped by the Foundation to be a test with lower stakes, they sent an expendable D-Class personnel towards SCP-001. The D-Class approached the area where the Gate Guardian is located, and as soon as they saw it, they could hear a very clear command in their mind: leave. The D-Class personnel reacted exactly the same way you or I would. They promptly turned and started to walk away. They didn't need a 1,000-foot-tall entity with a flaming sword to tell them twice. the researchers running the experiment were not swayed by the request and ordered the D-Class to continue moving towards SCP-001. When the D-Class continued to ignore their commands, they were terminated, as is standard policy when dealing with an insubordinate member of D-Class. SCP-001 appeared not to like this for some reason though, and the researcher site as well as the researchers themselves were immediately obliterated by an unknown force, though it's a pretty safe guess that a certain flaming weapon was responsible. This candidate for SCP-001 may be one of, if not the most powerful being that the SCP Foundation has ever encountered. And according to its entry in the SCP-001 file, the Guardian is even responsible for the creation of the Foundation itself. If the file is to be believed, the administrator of the SCP Foundation one day heard a word echoing through his head: prepare. This one-word instruction led him to starting the SCP Foundation, containing countless dangerous anomalies and entities in preparation for an uncertain future. In all that time, since the very beginning of the Foundation, the Gate Guardian has remained standing at its post. While it is not aggressive nor openly hostile towards humanity, the Gate Guardian doesn't seem to care much for us either, at least as individuals. It rarely interacts with human beings when left unprovoked, and venturing too close to the Guardian, however, is not an automatic death sentence. The Guardian first communicates with any living being approaching it via telepathic message, instructing them to either leave or forget. If whomever has stepped too close to SCP-001 complies with the instructions, they'll be able to freely leave the area, while simultaneously forgetting every detail of the Gate Guardian's existence. Ignore these warnings though, and SCP-001 has no qualms about completely eliminating you from reality. Given its enormous destructive potential, it is no wonder that the Foundation has tried to use the Gate Guardian to eliminate other dangerous SCPs, each with varying results. The Foundation at one time even attempted to use the Gate Guardian to destroy the infamously indestructible SCP-682, better known by the appropriate name of the hard-to-destroy reptile. Due to the malicious contempt SCP-682 holds for human beings and all other forms of life, it is perhaps one of the most dangerous anomalies the SCP Foundation has in containment. SCP-682 is also one of the few creatures the Foundation actively wants to terminate, a task made that much harder given that 682 can regenerate its entire form from as little as a single cell. The Gate Guardian had already shown time and time again that it was capable of massive destruction, and researchers working for the Foundation hoped to harness that power to rid the world of SCP-682 for good. 682 was placed on an unmanned vehicle and carried to within 1 kilometer of the Gate Guardian. The Guardian attacked the vehicle, seriously wounding but not killing 682. It seemed even the mighty SCP-001 couldn't kill the hard-to-destroy reptile. While the researchers were disappointed with this result, it is worth noting that 682 made a very interesting comment to the Guardian. 682 mentioned that the Gate Guardian is not Uriel, but a pretender. Uriel is the archangel that some religious texts describe as the Guardian standing at the Gate of Eden with a fiery sword. So does this mean that 682 knows that the Gate Guardian is not actually an angel? Or that the location it is guarding isn't the Garden of Eden at all? Any truth or meaning behind these comments has, as of yet, been undetermined by the SCP Foundation. A later experiment involved both SCP-001 and SCP-073, the anomaly otherwise known as Cain. Cain is a male humanoid of possible Arabic descent whose arms, legs, spine, and shoulders are replaced in an almost cyborg-like fashion with beryllium bronze. Much like the Gate Guardian, SCP-073 may also be the same as the one mentioned in the Bible's book of Genesis, who, according to the biblical story, murdered his own brother Abel out of spite. As punishment for his actions, Cain was cursed to eternally suffer for his wrongdoing. In the case of SCP-073, any damage inflicted on him is deflected back to the attacker, but Cain is made to feel the pain of the attack. Any plants or plant-based matter withers and rots in his presence, and he is cursed with a perfect memory, keeping him forever haunted by his murder of Abel. When Cain was brought before the Gate Guardian, an unknown incident occurred. The Foundation's records are heavily expunged,
but we do know that somehow Kane's usual ability to deflect incoming damage back at his attacker had no effect on SCP-001. The encounter left SCP-073 unconscious and even permanently blinded nearby research personnel. It was as a direct result of this incident that the O5 Council demanded that no further experiments of any kind were to be conducted on SCP-001, with the administrator even filing an executive order that no SCPs be exposed to the Guardian, and that SCP-001 was to never be used for the attempted termination of other SCPs. Of course, perhaps it wasn't just the mistakes of the past that made the Council decide that SCP-001 was best left alone. At some point, an erratic transmission was received from Site-0 by Foundation personnel, detailing an XK-class end-of-the-world scenario. In the transmission, the sender, believed to be another member of the SCP Foundation, described an event during which the Gate Guardian finally left its post, stepping away from the entrance to the Garden of Eden. SCP-001 has left its location, the sender wrote. The gate is open. They are riding forth. Oh God, it's so beautiful. The transmission then goes on to repeat various phrases including, "The Lord shall reign forever," and "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." What can be inferred from the rambling transmission is that the event being described is the end of the world. Some believe that once God deems it time, his angelic armies will lay waste to the earth in order to remake it as a paradise. When this occurs, SCP-001, the Gate Guardian, will open the gate he stands in front of, allowing the other beings like it to emerge into our world, ready to cleanse it. Perhaps most interesting is the source of the message. The transmission was received from within the Foundation from Site-0. However, when questioned by personnel, O5-14 told them that no such message had been sent or even existed. While some disregarded the transmission telling of the end of the world as a hoax, it was then that a timestamp was discovered. This warning had not been sent from Site-0, at least not yet, and was dated several years in the future. Despite this ominous warning of things to come, the Gate Guardian remains inactive, standing at the threshold to Eden, waiting.
Does the Black Moon howl? No, not yet. See the boy. He was born in a time before names. There weren't enough humans around to need them back then. He was one of a handful occupying a coastal village, using a tongue long since dead. They eked out a simple life, hunting, gathering, fishing. The only thing on most of their minds was surviving to see the next sunrise. Yes, a simple life, free of complications, until the hermit appeared. The boy would remember this man for eternity, haggard and thin, skin weathered by time and pain. A man that, emaciated, walking with a long, gnarled cane that honestly looked healthier than he did, shouldn't be alive. Even the boy, who had scarcely seen beyond the bounds of his village, knew that the hermit was unnatural. An aberration, an anomaly. He walked into the center of the village, sat down on a large stone, and waited. Nobody dared ask his business, nor what the hermit waited for. Then, a few days later, the Black Moon howled. The boy saw the village's youngest hunter freeze one evening while out on a walk. Not simply stand still, but freeze. Then, for an instant, he became solid black. A coal statue, and as soon as he'd changed, he was gone. Obliterated, not a trace of him remained. Such is the power of the Black Moon. It can make any conscious being disappear in an instant, turn black, then wiped from our plane of existence, never to be seen again. Its choice of victims seemed at each instance to be utterly random, but it would come for all who lived eventually. This is known to some as the howling of the Black Moon. Later that same night, the boy found himself talking to the hermit, who asked with small, frantic eyes what he had seen. When the boy told him, he let out a deep, rattling sigh. The boy, curious, asked him if he knew about the nightmare he'd just witnessed. The hermit looked up. He'd been the first one in the hermit's millennia of pursuit that had ever asked. In that moment, he knew that he had found his successor in the hunt for the death of ages. The hermit told the boy it went by many names: the Great Finale, the Pale King, but most common of all was the Black Moon. The entity existed beyond the veil of our reality, a creature of pure energy, though nobody could really be sure of its true nature. The hermit had been tracking it, learning about it, and trying to destroy it for thousands of years. And yet it only took him 4 pathetic minutes to tell the boy everything he knew. The boy, knowing still that something about the hermit was unnatural, asked how he came to be in this position. The hermit told the boy he was the counterbalance, a kind of chosen one, destined to face and perhaps even defeat the Black Moon someday. The counterbalance receives a number of truly extraordinary gifts for inheriting the responsibility: eternal life, eternal youth, near physical immortality. But they will be haunted by their purpose, doomed to watch everyone they love die around them, as they continue to hunt their only true equal and opposite, the Black Moon itself. The hermit in his own eyes had failed at his duty. He had grown weary, and now he needed to pass the duty of counterbalance on to another. That other would be the boy. He felt a sudden and profound change, along with the knowledge that nothing would ever be the same again. He was no longer just the boy. Now, he was the counterbalance. He watched the hermit give him a slight nod of respect and then crumble into dust before his eyes. The boy, the counterbalance, looked up at the sky and saw the stars twinkling, so bright and so beautiful. Little did he know his battle with the Black Moon would outlast every single one of them. Does the Black Moon howl? Not without blood. The boy grew into a man as his village aged and then died around him. Decades passed, then centuries, then millennia. Tens of thousands of years watching humanity develop and grow around him as he continued his pursuit of that one elusive foe. As science and diagnostic technology gained ground, absorbing and then evolving beyond all the old superstitions, the counterbalance gained a better understanding of the Black Moon, though even then, it still remained essentially a stranger. The entity was entropic, a being of pure randomness and chaos without consistent form. It didn't exist in our universe, but it could exercise its influence here with so-called obliteration events, much like the horrible fate that befell the young hunter from the village. But that was only the proverbial tip of the iceberg. The counterbalance tracked and noted obliteration events. They were exceedingly rare at first, something that occurred once every 1,000 years or so, like a terrible curse. But he couldn't help but notice a concerning trend emerging. It started happening once a century, then once a decade. He could feel the terrible future stretching out in front of him. How, over their shared eternity, the Black Moon would gain more and more ground. Would there come a day where it took someone once a year, once a month, a week, a day, an hour, a minute, a second? It'd spell the end of all conscious life, a total victory for the Black Moon, the end of the universe, the death of ages, a complete existential obliteration. He was swept up in a sobering realization. He couldn't win this fight alone. However, while his hunt for the Black Moon had been largely fruitless, the counterbalance had discovered many other things along the way: strange creatures, objects with extraordinary powers, and events that couldn't be explained with rational science. Perhaps something about these oddities, these anomalies, would hold the key to defeating his timeless enemy. And it hadn't just been these objects, entities, and events. He'd also discovered some truly exceptional people on his travels, minds and skills that rivaled even his own, despite his age. Perhaps they would be the ones to help him win. With the 13 most brilliant and trusted people the counterbalance ever met, he decided to form a council. And from this council, they forged and directed an organization dedicated to understanding and counteracting the strange in all its forms, with the secret hope that their search into darkness would yield the answer to the Black Moon's downfall. He called it the SCP Foundation. They would secure the anomalous, contain it, and protect all of humanity from its influence. The counterbalance also took on a new title, befitting of his new role, the Administrator. And even the Black Moon itself was given a moniker, in hopes of robbing it of some of its frightening power. SCP-001. Does the Black Moon howl? Only at the blind. The year was now 1987. The SCP Foundation had been operating for over a century, and thanks to their secret possession of anomalous wisdom and technology, their own advancement was thousands of years ahead of the rest of humanity. While there still wasn't a silver bullet solution to the Black Moon, and its deadly howls were becoming all the more frequent as the decades went on, the Foundation did have some irons in the fire to combat it. Their ability to gather intel on both the entity itself and its obliteration events had improved considerably, thanks to their new global information network. Their top minds were also working on a highly classified device known as the Singular Conceptual Bunker, which may one day come in handy for combating the extra-dimensional entity directly. But the most valuable piece of information they ever gathered about the Black Moon was this: it couldn't howl when it was being watched. The very act of engaged observation defanged it. The problem is, how can you observe something that doesn't technically exist inside your own reality? In order to pull this off, the Foundation would need to get extremely creative. Thankfully, creative solutions to strange problems are the Foundation's specialty. Flash forward to 1993. Enter Dr. Moto, a brilliant young scientist and conceptual engineer working for the SCP Foundation. With the Administrator's consultation, he started the Key Project, an arm of the wider Project Ouroboros, the umbrella initiative for using modified anomalous objects in the battle against the Black Moon. The goal of the Key Project was relatively simple. If people couldn't observe the Black Moon directly, then the Foundation could make proxies of the Black Moon that could be observed, almost like a kind of voodoo doll. These new anomalies would only need to satisfy 3 criteria: the inability to operate when being observed, a hostility to conscious life, and the ability to end conscious life of their own volition when not being observed. Through conceptual engineering, a link theoretically could be forged between these objects and the Black Moon, allowing observation of them to stop the obliteration events. However, despite being a good idea in theory, Dr. Moto's efforts were marred with errors and tragedies. One object wasn't deadly enough, simply appearing behind people in a threatening pose when they weren't looking. Another one killed purely through collateral damage, a giant sculpture of a human head that immediately attempted escape by barging through Site-01, the Center for Anti-Black Moon Operations, and killing 19 people in the process. Another one of Moto's objects, a huge black sphere, simply immediately exploded, killing 12 people. And in the most horrific misstep of all, one of Moto's objects caused a mass death event in a nearby hotel, where 142 people were spontaneously incinerated when the object, a series of interlocking stalactites and stalagmites, were left unobserved for 0.2 seconds. Almost all of Moto's objects were terminated in the aftermath, either being too useless or too dangerous to keep around. The young scientist felt a deep shame, but forged on. He made one truly brilliant creation that satisfied all the criteria: a sculpture incapable of moving while being watched, but would snap the neck of the nearest conscious entity if it left unobserved for even a fraction of a second. Its relatively minimal killing left it easy to contain without causing mass deaths, and despite all of the other deaths that had sadly occurred during the Key Project, Dr. Moto believed that the lives saved in the long run by stopping the Black Moon's howls would justify the sacrifice. The problem is, the Key Project didn't stop anything. Not long after this, there was the first recorded double obliteration event in Rome, where a young tourist couple had both been obliterated simultaneously. All the deaths in the Key Project had been for nothing. The Black Moon was only getting more powerful. The shame and the guilt was too much for Dr. Moto. He left a note in his office reading, "We've been looking at nothing. I'm sorry, Administrator. I failed you, sir." Moto's corpse was later found in the sculpture's temporary containment chamber. His neck snapped. The Key Project was, in summary, shut down, and its one surviving creation transported to Site-19 in late 1993, where it was designated as SCP-173. Another painful failure for the Administrator. Back to the drawing board once more. Does the Black Moon howl? Not while the stars shine. Millennia stretched on. Almost everyone died except the administrator thanks to his gift, or perhaps curse, as the counterbalance to the Black Moon. Science marched on. The SCP Foundation marched on. But all this progress, all this power, was nothing against the incomprehensible influence of SCP-001. The Black Moon was howling more frequently than ever, all the way up to the year 3156, when the Foundation launched the Seek Project under the support of Project Ouroboros. As more and more people were wiped out in frequent obliteration events, the administrator became painfully aware that perhaps the answers to the Black Moon problem wouldn't be found on Earth. Using state-of-the-art technology, with a little help from the Anomalous, the SCP Foundation began work on an autonomous spacefaring vessel that could search the stars for the key to the Black Moon's destruction. It was an awe-inspiring creation, a huge craft powered by artificial intelligence with a universal translator, cryogenic units, and hundreds of autonomous drones to perform more targeted searches. Seek was waved off into the unforgiving depths of space. The administrator could only hope that it would come back with worthwhile answers. The first of the 3 notable planets Seek arrived on was one theoretically capable of supporting human life, except for its brutal and constant blizzards and snowstorms. When Seek's drones were deployed, they did discover signs of civilization based around sentient spherical creatures, but no signs of actual life remained. Records and statues found across the planet seem to indicate that the Black Moon was responsible for the destruction of the planet's civilization, causing so many obliteration events that the remaining survivors went mad from the fear and stress, leading to mass death in the ensuing chaos. The next planet was discovered centuries later, in the year 3499. While this planet could also theoretically support human life, it suffered from frequent volcanic eruptions that rendered much of its surface a flaming mess. However, there were still the dormant ruins of a once advanced civilization of conscious beings. Much like the prior planet, they'd been driven extinct by Black Moon obliteration events a century before the Seek even arrived. Unlike the last planet, however, it seems that they accepted their fate and went gently into the night. The planet was now overrun by billions of armored bat-like creatures that operated on pure instinct, and thus were not considered conscious enough to be obliterated. The final planet was reached in 3764, and was the most fruitful of the 3 discoveries. This planet was hyper-advanced, fully urbanized, and covered in sprawling megacities, with records and technology over 1,000 years ahead of Earth. Before the Black Moon killed almost all of them, there were a species of humanoid telepathic fungi, and had developed an awareness of the Black Moon's existence that was on par with that of humanity's. They even had their own equivalent of the SCP Foundation actively working on countermeasures. And most amazingly of all, Seek found one surviving member of this species on the planet, cryogenically frozen. The craft was immediately instructed to collect the survivor and return home for interrogation. The administrator was preparing for what could be the most important conversation since he met the Hermit all those thousands of years ago. Does the Black Moon howl only when waning? When the surviving creature, codenamed Sage, was returned to Earth, the administrator was eager to finally speak with it. Like the rest of its now extinct species, Sage spoke through powerful telepathic mind waves, which only the administrator, thanks to his counterbalance abilities, was able to receive at close range without being harmed. Incidentally, it wasn't long until the very fact of the administrator's nature as a counterbalance came up in the mental conversation. Sage could tell, just by being in his presence. They discovered a number of vital truths over their brief time communicating. That Sage's survival had been pure luck, for starters. The Black Moon is still very much capable of obliterating conscious beings in an unconscious state. The administrator also learned that he was merely the latest in an extremely long line of counterbalances across time, space, and species. Though everyone but him had waived this duty, passed it on. Sage had one question to ask the administrator in turn. What is SCB? The singular conceptual bunker being worked on and perfected for thousands of years by now by the Foundation's top scientists and conceptual engineers. The administrator replied, "Victory, but it will take a very, very long time. Specifically, so long that he would see the stars go out around him, one by one." Shocked, Sage asked him what good victory would do him then. Rather than say it aloud, he replied with a thought. Sage paused and said, "I see. How blasphemous of you. Hopefully it works." After this, the administrator proceeded to the singular conceptual bunker and entered it, leaving instructions for the Foundation to be run by a newly formed O5 Council in his indefinite absence. Thousands of years later, in the year 5011, Sage spoke one more time, repeating the words, "Hopefully, hopefully," before turning solid black and disappearing. The Black Moon had claimed one more victim, but billions more had gone in the interim. The administrator had no more answers to give. At least, no more answers that anyone but him would understand. He was inside the singular conceptual bunker now, loaded into a device known as Tome, an experimental memorial module meant to pick up and record all the last messages of every dying civilization across the universe. When the time finally came, all he could do was wait, and wait was exactly what we did. Does the Black Moon howl? Yes, yes it does. Years pass, too many to count. It's a time after names now, and Tome sits in the very center drinking in the end of the universe. The last of all the human colonies across the universe were obliterated by the Black Moon back in the year 7329. So long ago. But some of the final messages of fear, panic, and distress still echoed around in the administrator's mind.
Hello? Is there anyone here? We require assistance. It's taking people every day. We need help. There's barely anyone left. We need help. Hello? Hello? Cabal 0943, we have abandoned the false flesh. We have abandoned the false flesh. The shepherd's crook broken neath my knee. Cabal 0943, Cabal 0943, forgive us! Forgive us! We're going to leave this on. It's so dark outside now. It's blotted out the sun. I have to go now.
Respond. First convenience. Emergency. Situation developing. Require additional resources.
My fault, your fault, our fault, my fault, your fault, our fault, my fault, your fault, our fault! Rip my brain out now, rip my brain out now!
And a small child, the last on Earth, simply asking, "Hello?" into an indifferent microphone. But the administrator had to wait. As the singular conceptual bunker became the solitary conceptual bunker, he was the last conscious being in the universe, and still he needed to wait as the stars went dark outside. Only when there was nothing outside but black was it finally time for the counterbalance's long game to play off. There was nothing left of our universe. The only thing here was the SCB and the Black Moon itself. With everything else gone, the Black Moon only had one conscious being left to obliterate. It opened the door to the solitary conceptual bunker and stepped inside. This doesn't make sense. How can the Black Moon, an entity beyond our dimension, beyond physical form, take a step? Good question. The same question, incidentally, that was going through the Black Moon's mind as it entered the bunker. It didn't look at all how the entity expected. It was like a bar, a counter, with rows of bottles behind it, a jukebox playing in the corner. A man stood behind the bar cleaning the glasses. The counterbalance. The administrator. He said, "Well, there you are. Certainly took your time. Can I pour you a little something?" This only served to increase the Black Moon's confusion. It had form here. Dark smoke compressed into a vaguely humanoid shape. It could speak. It could think. None of this made any sense. The being that had just wiped out all conscious life and seen the very death of the universe was truly and utterly confused. The administrator just seemed to be enjoying himself, preparing for a confrontation hundreds of billions of years in the making. The singular conceptual bunker, or perhaps the singular containment bunker, was a truly ingenious creation. A place of pure ideas, where everything inside was on the same level. Here there were no immortals, no gods, just ideas on the same level playing field. And it was time for the Black Moon's idea to come to an end. It was a trap, and the entire universe was the bait. Without warning, the administrator pulled up a shotgun from underneath the table and unleashed both barrels into the Black Moon's chest. The creature took the hit and fought back, dragging the administrator to the ground, beating him, strangling him. He could feel the light fading under the monster's relentless assault, until he managed to get his desperate hands on a glass ashtray. He beat the monster over the head with it until its grip loosened, and he was able to slide out. There, the killer of the universe was on the ground before him. He grabbed the monster, held it in place, and beat it to death. He was gravely injured by the battle, but the Black Moon was no more. Here in the singular conceptual bunker, he had won. The administrator, no longer the counterbalance in the absence of the Black Moon, hobbled over to the jukebox, produced a single beautiful coin from his pocket. He pushed the coin into the slot, wheezed a pained breath, and said, "The thing is, this place is only information. There's nothing else out there. Not even matter. The universe closed its doors a long time ago. But this place can go from information back to matter with just the press of a button." Let's see what happens when we introduce something to nothing. For a second it looks as though he might fall, but he doesn't. Instead, he slams the button on the jukebox, and with a relieved laugh says, "Let there be light." And there was light. The smell of fire and oil fills the air. The sound of gears grinding can be heard between the explosions and shrieks of terror. A man runs out of his house, only to have his leg grabbed by a metal arm and dragged back through his front door. SCP-001 leaves a trail of metal fragments and mechanical parts on the ground in the wake of its destruction. Iron chains swing from its form. Cast iron gears whirl within it. A glowing light throbs from the center of its body. SCP-001 is consuming everything in its path. After incorporating the truck chassis into its being, SCP-001 rolls in a lumbering fashion to the next house. It rips the gutters from the side of the building. Residents who live in the area flee their neighborhood, all the while hoping that the mechanical monstrosity skips over their house, so they have something to return to if they make it out alive. A section of SCP-001's undercarriage drops away from the main body. It rolls down the street, consuming more and more material. The new entity resembles a human spine and rib cage. It topples over, unable to support itself. The rib-like formations extend out to grab anything and everything within reach. The newly incorporated material forms what can only be described as a head. Light from within the eye sockets fixate on nearby civilians. The metallic creature picks up the people and places them inside its exposed steel ribcage. Then it turns and spots a woman helplessly trying to crawl away. The creature reaches out with a spiked tentacle and wraps it around the woman's body. She is placed inside of the chest cavity. Moments later, a severed hand falls out of the entity and onto the ground. The mechanical monster continues to gather bodies and materials, incorporating them into its frame. A growth begins to slowly expand on its back. It becomes so massive that the creature falls over and uses its limbs to scurry to a nearby house. There is a sickening crunching sound as the growth bursts. From within emerges 3 humanoid creatures resembling the civilians that the entity had consumed earlier. A female with chains extending from her scalp like dreadlocks stumbles away. The second humanoid is a man with cogs for limbs. He examines the clock-like components that have been incorporated into his body, then stares blankly into the distance. The third humanoid lies motionless on the ground. He did not make it. The 2 functioning humanoids look at their creator intently. For a moment, nothing moves. Then, as if they have been given orders telepathically, the half-human, half-machine humanoids turn and run away from the mayhem. A few weeks before the massacre caused by what would be designated as SCP-001, the Foundation had been in contact with the Allied Occult Initiative. There were rumors of an anomalous object in Mexico being worshipped by a group of people who identified themselves as the Church of the Broken God. Intel about the church claimed their deity was a small mechanical box filled with cogs and pistons. The box supposedly had supernatural abilities. It was said to be able to communicate with congregants of the Church of the Broken God telepathically. The devout worshipped the box, following any order it gave, and in return they were filled with an emotion that could be only described as divine. As World War II rages on in Europe, the Foundation sends agents to recover anomalies in Mexico that might help with the war effort. While there, the Foundation force is tasked with learning about the Church of the Broken God. They are also ordered to investigate a town near La Paz, where there are troubling accounts of a mechanical anomalous creature causing mayhem. The agents make their way through Mexico, gathering various objects to bring back to Foundation sites in the United States. The unit loads all of the anomalies they recovered onto a train, with a plan to check out the stories of the mechanical anomaly they've heard about as they make their way to the US border. The train heads north along rusted rails. Just outside La Paz, they've come across a broken down train filled with what looks to be refugees. When the Foundation unit goes to investigate, they find all of the refugees repeating the same words over and over again, but they don't understand. The Foundation agents look at one another confused, until one of them translates the words into English. The words the refugees are saying over and over again are La Máquina, the machine. The commanding officer orders a squad of Foundation agents to proceed up the tracks, to see if they can figure out what has the refugees so scared. They make their way towards La Paz, disappearing over the horizon. As the sun sets, the remaining Foundation agents hear gunshots in the distance. They stay awake all night, remaining vigilant, waiting for the exploratory squad, but morning comes without anyone returning. 3 days later, the Foundation force still has not seen anything since the exploratory squad left. Then, as the sun sits lazily in the morning sky, a lone figure is spotted walking down the tracks towards the trains. One of the agents on watch blows his whistle and points to the figure. A squad of agents rushes towards the shadow of a man. Their guns are raised, ready for anything. The figure drops to the ground and begins to crawl along the tracks. The agents reach the fallen man, only to find that he is one of their squad mates who has been sent up the tracks to investigate La Paz several days before. The agent's name is DeMarco. He is covered in blood. His clothes are in tatters and he has lost a boot. DeMarco lies on his back with Foundation agents standing around him. His eyes are wide and wild. He keeps babbling on about a world eater, how the rest of his squad had been mulched, and he is the only one who made it out alive. The Foundation agents carry DeMarco back to the makeshift base they created by the trains. They need to figure out a way to get the convoy moving again, but whatever is up ahead has already taken out an entire Foundation squad. It had to be something anomalous, but what could it possibly be? The unit of Foundation agents prepare to move towards La Paz. They start loading their rifles and check the amount of ammunition and explosives available in case the containment process gets out of hand. Just as they are about to leave the base, a convoy appears on the horizon. It is an allied occult initiative force preparing to attack whatever it is that is devastating La Paz. This organization's mission is to not secure, contain, or protect, but to destroy. The Foundation may be in over their heads on this one, and the joint force with the Allied Occult Initiative may be the only way to stop what is now known as SCP-001. The AOI and Foundation force gears up for battle. They set out for La Paz, and what they find causes them to quake with fear. SCP-001 has consumed so much material, it is the size of a mountain. It moves like a tidal wave of mechanical destruction, washing over the buildings and landscape under it. Whatever SCP-001 passes over is consumed and added to its massive body. SCP-001 started as a small mechanical box with cogs, but now has morphed into a gigantic metal death machine. The Church of the Broken God has finally met their maker, as the small entity they once worshipped has now consumed all of its members. Their god is an all-consuming monster. The AOI and Foundation forces do everything they can to stop SCP-001 from continuing its reign of destruction. They fire barrage after barrage of bullets and explosives into the mechanical anomaly. They bring in air support to try and damage it from the skies, but nothing works. The AOI uses an artifact in their possession to lure SCP-001 to the coast of the Pacific Ocean, where a trap has been set for the so-called god. The monstrous mechanical creature moves slowly towards the water. It consumes abandoned cars, buildings, and boats as it approaches the coastline. It even shovels large amounts of earth into its form, causing flames to spurt out from its inner workings. Smoke bellows from openings between different mechanical components, like a volcano before it is about to erupt. Suddenly, seemingly from nowhere, a massive cloud with a reddish tint appears in the sky. Air raid sirens can be heard in the distance. The enormous cloud begins to pulsate. Streaks of lightning shoot through the red mist in the sky. It now sits directly over SCP-001. From within the cloud, part of a ship can be seen. It appears to be slightly damaged. Electricity flows over its hull. The vessel in the giant red cloud is classified as SCP-2399. The underside of the vessel begins to glow aqua blue. A blinding beam of light is ejected from SCP-2399, which penetrates straight down and through SCP-001. For a moment, everything is still. There is complete silence. Then, as if SCP-001 is trying to reach up and grab the vessel above it, a mechanical bulge reaches out. Before SCP-001 can grab the vessel above, there is another bright flash of light. SCP-2399 blinks out of existence. The sound of grinding gears can be heard coming from within SCP-001. It begins to shed its outer layers of metal. Then the entire structure that was SCP-001 collapses into the water and onto the beach. Giant cogs fall from the sky. Parts of vehicles embed themselves in the sand. As the Foundation and AOI agents approach the piles of scrap metal and mechanical components, they see that some of them are still moving. It is as if an invisible power source is still pulsating through some of the machinery. The agents of the Foundation celebrate the destruction of the giant mechanical beast, but little do they know this was only a piece of the entity worshipped as the Broken God. The Foundation agents collect as many of the still-moving parts as they can. They find spinning gears, twitching pulleys, and firing pistons. As the parts are separated from one another and carried away from the main wreckage of SCP-001, they slowly stop moving and become inactive. Some of the artifacts recovered were identified as being connected to the Church of the Broken God. These artifacts are found closer to the middle of what was once a mountain-sized SCP-001. Hundreds of anomalous artifacts are collected and transported to SCP Foundation sites. Collecting the broken parts of SCP-001 is relatively safe. However, some agents get too close to the larger moving parts, getting caught in them and losing a body part or two. But most agents proceed with caution and survive the collection ordeal with their arms and legs still attached to their bodies. Dive teams are sent into the water to recover parts that have sunk to the bottom of the sea. One of the divers is a local from the area. He is hired to bring up the heart of the machine, since he is an experienced diver used to freediving to great depths to collect oysters from the bottom of the bay. The diver enters the water and swims down into the murky depths. He secures straps around the heart of SCP-001 and pulls hard on the rope, as an indication to the surface that it is ready to be hauled up. The salvage team on the surface begins to pull. There is a second slight tug on the rope, then it goes slack. The team continues to pull. When they get the heart to the surface, they are horrified at what else comes up with it. Tangled in the ropes is the lifeless body of the diver. His head is smashed between two moving pieces of the heart. It looks as if he shoved his head between the slabs of metal himself. The salvage team untangles the body, rolls it off the deck, and back into the ocean. The mechanical box, which was the heart of SCP-001, is offloaded on the shore, but as the Foundation prepares to move it to a containment facility, the weather starts to deteriorate. Hurricane-force winds sweeps across the water and batter the coast. The heart is kept in a secured storage warehouse until it can be moved. The people living in the village nearby complain of hearing voices and rashes so itchy that they practically tear their skin off. Once the storm passes, the Foundation agents load the heart onto a ship. It is to be transported to a Foundation site just across the border. The ocean seems calm and serene. The Foundation ship undocks and begins its journey up the coast. Not too long after beginning its journey, the ship slowly drifts off course. It is as if the crew has stopped manning their posts, and the ship is being controlled by a mind of its own. The Foundation ship crashes and sinks somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, never to be found. And most importantly, the heart of SCP-001 doesn't make it to the Foundation site. Years later, a man is walking along the beach. He hears something. It sounds like someone pounding on a large drum to the rhythm of a heartbeat. The man walks towards the sound. Something is drawing him forward, closer and closer to the heartbeat. He walks and walks until the beating stops. He bends down and moves the sand aside. He spots the corner of a mechanical box sticking out of the white sand. The man digs deeper and pulls out the small box. Inside, he can see gears whirling and pistons firing. He holds the box close to his own heart. It seems to speak to him. The man brings the box back to town. He starts to worship the box, and soon more and more people in the area join the new religion. They cast aside their own beliefs and focus on the powerful entity contained within the box. God is not dead, at least not yet. But the prophecies of the Church of the Broken God say that when the heart is found, the God will reassemble itself once again. Then the unbroken God will destroy all other false deities, until only he remains. The SCP Foundation has faced a number of wide, potentially apocalyptic threats in its mission to uphold normalcy and save humanity. We know the SCP Foundation could be ruthless in this mission. The events of SCP-5000 before Agent Pietro restarted the universe show what happens when the Foundation is pushed to its final decisions regarding normalcy being upheld. In SCP-5000, it seemed that the SCP Foundation decided to cease research further into the anomaly they needed to neutralize. But what would have happened if they didn't? In any case, we know the SCP Foundation is dedicated to normalcy and the containment of the anomalous. But what happens when the SCP Foundation is faced with a dire decision: uphold normalcy or destroy their universe? The multiverse is a concept in science fiction that has gained mass amounts of popularity over recent years, especially recently thanks to a certain wall crawlers movie. Multiverses are parallel universes that are similar or extremely different from the main ones. Scientists have pondered over the existence of a multiverse for hundreds of years, with the most popular being the many worlds interpretation, a theory of quantum mechanics that states there are many worlds that exist in parallel at the same space and time as our own. Some interpretations even state that every decision a person makes causes a branch in reality where the person made the other decision. We're familiar with the SCP Foundation's run-ins with the multiverse, from SCP-2935-0 Death, a cave that allows the Wanderer to enter a parallel dimension that's fully and completely dead, only for the same thing to happen to their own world once they return through the cave, or SCP-1437, a hole that allows the Foundation to send, receive, and read parallel dimensional documentation from other multiversal SCP Foundations. Combine those two concepts with an SCP-001 proposal. The importance of an SCP-001 proposal is not lost on the Foundation. Researchers of the SCP Foundation saved the SCP-001 slot for only the most dangerous, apocalyptic, or widespread anomalies that could affect the Foundation itself, humanity, and normalcy. Arbalik's SCP-001 proposal and the research within its file found the answer to the question we posed above. When the SCP Foundation is faced with a dire decision, do they uphold normalcy or destroy their universe and all the people who live in it? The file begins somewhat different from what we're used to with SCP Foundation files. Instead of an item number or containment procedures, we begin with a yellow notice from the Records and Information Security Administration, or RAISA for short. The notice states that the following file was received in 2026 from Dimension R42. Is Dimension R42 potentially the cause of SCP-001? Could they be attacking this version of the SCP Foundation? The notice continues with a description of the file that follows it. It states the file below describes an anomaly threatening all members of humankind in all of the multiverse. This file had been emitted to this version of the SCP Foundation for 8 minutes as an extremely dangerous cognitohazard, classified as a Class 5 cognitohazard capable of easily destabilizing and penetrating this universe. However, it was found to not be dangerous, only reading as a danger level 0. While this Foundation was unable to quickly counteract this cognitohazard, it appeared to not pose a threat to the affected universe's humankind. Part of this notice is crossed out, indicating that it is no longer true. There is a high threat of repeated cognitohazardous or other forms of attack from Dimension R42. Instead, this part has been replaced with the following fact: Dimension R42 no longer exists. Did this version's SCP Foundation fall to SCP-001? Their entire universe no longer exists, so perhaps this file that this dimension's SCP Foundation received could be a potential warning. Under this RAISA notice, the reader is not greeted with the standard Foundation documentation yet again. Instead, it seems that the original senders of this file left a note for the readers of this file. It says, "Greetings. You are reading this dossier in a paradimension of the relict dimension R42. Due to the colossal size of your world's address,
For your convenience, your dimension will be hereafter referred to as PD, Paradimensions. It seems as though we're reading this SCP-001 file through the eyes of the SCP Foundation in this so-called paradimension. So, if the original SCP Foundation and their universe, R42, is now destroyed, what does this mean for us? The note continues. The following message has been constructed by the SCP Foundation of the Relic Dimension R42 and is addressed to the SCP Foundation of Paradimension PD. Enclosed you will find information about SCP-001, which is a threat to the multiverse. Here we go. SCP-001 is definitely the cause of R42's destruction, but how can we be so sure of this? Maybe SCP-001 caused the Foundation to destroy their universe. The note also includes the following statement. As you may have noticed, this message was preceded by a burst signal containing a non-dangerous cognito hazard. The burst signal was constructed in such a way that minimal change to the signal would have caused indiscriminate and overwhelming casualties among the denizens of PD. As you can see, R42 is capable of eliminating the absolute majority of PD denizens, but has not exercised this capability. In the context above, we ask you to consider this action not as an act of aggression, but as a demonstration of the fact that R42 has no pretension for conquest or other forms of aggression towards PD. Take the following information in earnest. Well, at least this version of the SCP Foundation is being somewhat friendly with the paradimension. If R42's SCP Foundation needs to quell this multiversal threat though, why are they leaving it up to an SCP Foundation that may not be so inclined? The SCP-001 file begins with the object class. This anomaly is of the joint class of Paradox Apollyon. We know from SCP-001 When Day Breaks, or SCP-3999, that Apollyon-class anomalies are extremely dangerous, posing an immediate and almost unstoppable threat to normalcy, the SCP Foundation, all of humanity, or even the universe itself. The paradox part is interesting. What exactly is paradoxical about an Apollyon-class anomaly? A footnote explains this for us. This anomaly's distinguishing feature is that, in order to eliminate the anomaly that will inevitably eliminate mankind, it is imperative to eliminate mankind or release another K-class event. Oh boy. It seems that the SCP Foundation of R42 was not eliminated by SCP-001. They eliminated themselves to contain SCP-001. Is this paradimension faced with this decision now? The containment procedures of the SCP file continue on this note. The only way to contain SCP-001 and prevent a ZK-class cross-reality failure event is the annihilation of humankind. K-class scenarios are not a concept used lightly by the SCP Foundation. We're familiar with the Omega K-class scenario when we are completely rid of death, or XK-class end-of-the-world scenarios, so we know the danger these anomalies hold to humankind, normalcy, and the world. The SCP Foundation will do anything to prevent these scenarios from occurring, apparently even including the elimination of all humankind or entire universes. The description goes more in depth on the SCP-001 anomaly. SCP-001 consists of all living members of the Homo sapiens species living within Dimension R42 and the Paradimension, or PD for short. It seems as though this anomaly was created out of a mistake from Dimension R42 and PD. As the description states, the anomaly first came into existence and developed in the Relic Dimension R42 and later activated in PD by accident. How could this have happened? Are these dimensions linked much more closely than we first thought? Let's continue with the description to find more information. Scarily, this portion of the description contains a note that states that unchecked growth of SCP-001 will cause the annihilation of the entire multiverse. The SCP Foundations of Dimension R42 and PD are not met with this decision, as now the entire multiverse is at risk. The R42 SCP Foundation has done immense research on the topic of the multiverse of their universe. After the Big Bang, a finite number of universes were created, only 57 to be exact. However, only one dimension was able to form humanity, Dimension R42, and it's unknown why this happened.
but all we know is that with the destruction of R42 and the potential annihilation of PD, humanity will cease to exist in the multiverse. The danger of SCP-001 is that it has the anomalous capability for wide-scale replication of paradimensions. We are reading this article from one of these paradimensions, so this SCP Foundation is technically an anomaly that must contain itself. A paradimension is defined as a parallel reality that has an extremely small deviation from its parent dimension. In this case, PD is a paradimension of R42. It seems that these paradimensions form as a result of human decision-making. So if you've ever been between a type of shirt to buy or were confused on an exam and guessed a question, a paradimension could have formed from this decision, where the paradimension has you take the other choice. Because of this, dimensions housing living instances of SCP-001 uncontrollably grow a colossal number of minimally differing paradimensions every second. No sign of paradimensions have been found in the other 56 parent dimensions. The picture on this file shows how PD has branched from R42, but at this point, it seems that millions, if not billions or trillions of paradimensions now exist. The real problem of paradimensions is that the multiverse has a limit on the number of paradimensions that can exist, and once that is crossed, the ZK-class cross-reality failure event will begin, and the multiverse will be destroyed. The R42 Dimensions SCP Foundation has also discovered that once humankind emerges in the paradimension, they can begin to have paradimensions themselves. The ZK-class cross-reality failure event can be expected to begin between 4 to 2 months from the PD receiving this message. To summarize, SCP-001 is humankind, specifically its decision-making. When a person makes a decision, a paradimension may be created. The multiverse has a limit on the number of paradimensions it can have, and since paradimensions can have paradimensions, they are quickly approaching the ZK-class cross-reality failure event. The SCP Foundation of R42 is approximately 17 years ahead of PD, which allowed them to research and develop containment procedures to contain the anomaly and save the multiverse. R42's SCP Foundation discovered SCP-001 5 years before writing the file we're reading now. Aside from that, they developed 2 operations, Castling and Minimal Gain, to slow paradimension creation and prevent the ZK-class cross-reality failure event. In Stage 1 of Operation Minimal Gain, the Foundation began with neutralizing and decommissioning all of their contained anomalies under the classification of Euclid or Keter, specifically those that were expensive to contain or requiring high levels of personnel and researchers. Stage 2 saw Operation Castling be commenced. The R42 SCP Foundation launched rockets with variant C global amnestic dispersing warheads and took control over all countries in order to hold power over all humankind. In Stage 3, the Foundation began to move their world to a more natural state, destroying all hazardous, radioactive, chemical, and bacteriological objects, removing dams, and stopping oil extractions. During Stage 3, Stage 4 began. The R42 SCP Foundation began eliminating humanity in third world countries by use of viral and biological attacks. Stage 5 was a wider spread attack on humanity, where the SCP Foundation added deactivation-resistant viral agents to water treatment and collection plants, food products, medication, and household items of developed countries. By Stage 6, only 0.1% of humanity remained, and they were targeted with drone strikes or put into concentration camps for elimination. Stage 7. Of the remaining survivors, the Foundation sampled them to find the fittest of those left to preserve humankind. Stage 8 saw 15,000 of these people put into indefinite cryosleep, and the remaining survivors were eliminated. Stage 9 saw the destruction of the remaining SCP Foundation personnel. We move on to a list of proposals that were made before or during Operations Castling and Minimal Gain. Proposals rejected include the use of SCP objects or other technologies to eliminate derivative dimensions, the development of nanobots with the capability to control human decision-making capabilities and eliminate variability, full replacement of humanity with bionic hybrids acting explicitly within standard behavioral models, unification of humanity into a neural network with control given to an AI control unit,
and the destruction of Earth and/or all of its inhabitants. While most of these seem like clear solutions that would prevent the elimination of humanity at the SCP Foundation's hand, these proposals were all rejected for one reason: the SCP Foundation did not have enough time. One proposal was accepted, however: the use of SCP-0000. This appears to be the solution the R42 SCP Foundation concocted to fight SCP-001 and potentially save the multiverse. It poses the question: if the R42 SCP Foundation used this same anomaly to contain SCP-001, as proven by the fact they no longer exist, will PD do the same? The file explains that the R42 SCP Foundation opened a dimensional wormhole into PD, as they do not know at the time if paradimensions could cause the creation of more paradimensions. In doing this, the SCP Foundation seemingly infected PD with the ability to create paradimensions. The author of this file goes on to explain that the R42 SCP Foundation had plans to attack PD and use Operations Castling and Minimal Gain in the dimension. However, they could not access the dimension again, and they believe that the Foundation personnel of PD would have made use of Thaumiel-class anomalies to save themselves and their world. A note from R42's Overseer Council is left for PD. If the Apollyon destruction was not enough, the Overseer Council is involved. The importance of the neutralization of this anomaly cannot be forgotten, so the Overseer Council explained to PD:
The world has existed before us and must remain after us. Our multiverse is ill, and the name of the illness is humanity. SCP-001. The only way out is SCP-0000. Will cease to become a threat with its help. It is in our power to leave a chance for other sapient species that, perhaps, will not be affected by the same anomaly, or will find a way to get rid of it before it's too late. We, the O5 Council, and other survivors from R42 have chosen our fate. We hope you will do the same. What is this SCP-0000? How did the SCP Foundation of R42 find this solution? The file for SCP-0000 is placed within this SCP-001 file. SCP-0000 is a Paradox Thaumiel-class anomaly without any containment procedures. SCP-0000 is a device that, once activated, will destroy the universe it was activated in. It will also destroy all paradimensions that are not creating other paradimensions. As such, PD would not be destroyed. However, the billions or trillions of other paradimensions the R42 parent dimension created will be destroyed. PD is left with the harrowing decision to continue living or destroy itself to save the rest of the multiverse. In the file, a note from R42's Jones Simpson is written for an SCP Foundation Overseer, 05-1. As part of Operations Castling and Minimal Gain, the remaining Foundation employees were allowed one family member to uphold morale. Joan is not writing for R42's 05-1. Instead, she's writing for PD's 05-1, this dimension's version of her father. She begins with wondering whether she can call this version of 05-1 her father, as her version of her father recently passed away. She remembers the day the Foundation employees were allowed to choose that one family member they would save for the time being. Her father was opposed to allowing two family members, as he claimed it would cause unnecessary stress and schisms among the remaining few hundred Foundation staff. 05-1 chose to have Joan over her mother, and she understood everything by the look in his eyes, and grew angry, but that feeling is long gone now. She began to work with her father and the remaining Foundation personnel that called themselves hostages behind the backs of those higher up the ranks. On days she felt sad, Joan and her father would go up to the surface of the earth in hazmat suits, sitting on the grass and watching over the empty city at the bottom of the mountain. No humanity remained, with the only life she could see being birds. Her father promised her that they'd return there and build a giant monument to humanity at the center of the city. She knew this was a lie. Joan remembers when someone proposed that they should open a portal the one that opened to PD. This was their fatal mistake, as after that the paradimension began replicating paradimensions. The countdown went down to months again, and the promise he made to his daughter became impossible. 05-1 died and left the position vacant. Joan says to the PD's 05-1 that she doesn't care whether they destroy their world or not, or whether the universe will continue to exist, or if there will be new life in it. Her world was crushed long ago. The note also reads the following: "It's good that this message is encrypted with your key that was passed on to me, or these lines would have been deleted. Everyone wants to save the world, but who needs it like this? Empty and cold, without those to appreciate its beauty, without humanity. Do whatever you think is right. I truly feel better now. Love you. Faithfully yours, Joan Simpson." We're not too sure if PD went through with destroying their universe to save the multiverse, but it seems that whatever decision was made would cause the destruction of that universe, whether that be through the use of SCP-0000 or the ZK-class cross-reality failure event. Humanity will cease. But maybe if they make the decision to use SCP-0000, sapient life can begin to exist again, and hopefully, no paradimensions will be made from their decisions. Decisions are an extremely innate part of humanity. You decided to get out of bed this morning. You decided to open up your computer or phone, and you decided to watch this video. Who knows the amount of paradimensions we may have created today? But in our world, we're not at risk. But in the SCP Foundation's universe, anything can be anomalous, even humanity. It's a quiet evening at Area 11 where the Pietrocow Fontaine Spatial Stabilization Array is housed. A skeleton crew is working overnight to ensure the array is ready for its big test the following day. The Foundation has been working on a particle accelerator that will contain anomalies with the ability to manipulate the nature of space-time. The preliminary tests seem promising, but a few last-minute tweaks to the array are necessary. Unfortunately, it is on this night in 1982 that marks the beginning of the end for the SCP Foundation. Dr. Calvin Desmond is monitoring the array, and he notices as it spools up that there are some minor power fluctuation in one of the stabilization arms. This problem is not uncommon due to the vast amounts of energy being pumped through the array and the harmonic resonance the machine gives off, which slowly causes the coupling rings to loosen. Calvin Desmond decides that remounting the stabilization rings will be an easy fix, and it's a necessary one. He knows that if the rings fail during the actual test, the array could end up shut down for months. There is still plenty of time, so Calvin Desmond grabs his toolbox and heads down to the array. The machine is still spooling, keeping the energy flowing at a constant low rate. There is no danger at the moment, as the inside of the array is shielded from the radiation and energy pulsing through the outer ring. But then something unexpected happens. The system's primary generator begins to fluctuate uncontrollably. A catastrophic failure is imminent. Sirens begin to sound, the facility is evacuated, and the chamber is sealed. Deep in the bowels of the array, Calvin Desmond cannot hear the evacuation announcement. The humming of the array echoes through the chamber, dampening all sound from the outside world. The array begins to come online while Desmond continues to work on the coupling. He has no idea what is about to happen. Meanwhile, a team of Foundation scientists scramble to get the power fluctuations in the main generator under control. As they frantically work, catastrophe strikes. They initiate the power down cycle, but as the generator struggles to keep the power flow balanced, an energy surge builds up. A massive amount of energy is released all at once, causing the main reactor to explode. The entire structure rocks back and forth, and Desmond is thrown into the side of the array. He too now knows that something is very wrong and runs for the exit. When he reaches the door, he finds that it has been sealed. In a panic, Desmond continues running through the tube to the next access point. This door has been locked as well. He's never been so scared in his entire life, and he shakes uncontrollably from the adrenaline being dumped into his muscles. The surge of energy rushes through the array towards Desmond. A singularity begins to form in the containment chamber. The array is working just as it should, except that there was never supposed to be a person inside as the singularity was brought into existence. Moments after the singularity forms, the massive pull of its gravity causes the stabilizer arm that Desmond had been working on to fail. The side of the array is ripped off,
and Calvin Desmet stares into the naked eye of the singularity. Everything is silent and still for a moment. Then the singularity collapses in on itself, taking the test chamber and much of the research wing with it, along with Dr. Calvin Desmet. Sparking wires hang from the exposed walls and ceiling where the singularity ripped the main structure away. Water flows into the deep hole carved out of the earth where the array once stood. The scientists from Area 11 look into the crater left by the collapsed singularity. The Foundation administration sends agents to collect the staff at the site and document the failings of the project. They conclude that the accident was caused by human error. They order the array to be rebuilt, this time using entirely automated systems to eliminate the chances of another mishap occurring. Several years after the catastrophic events at Area 11, a new array is constructed. An intelligence system called NetZac is put in charge of overseeing its functions. It is a supercomputer that is programmed to follow commands, but can autonomously make decisions in order to prevent any failures in the system. Experiments begin again in May of 2006. The new array soon manifests its first singularity in the containment chamber at Area 11, and what happens next will forever change the Foundation and the multiverse. The singularity is kept stable in the array. It seems as if the Foundation has succeeded in trapping and containing spatial anomalies. But as they run more diagnostics on the anomaly, something unexpected happens. The singularity begins to grow in size. The point of infinite gravity threatens to breach containment as it reaches the boundaries of the array. Just before contact, the singularity's growth slows and then stops. NetZac has made the split-second calculations and adjustments necessary to contain the singularity. The artificial intelligence has saved the facility and the lives of everyone in it. Now, sitting in the array is a thick, rotating cloud of radioactive gas and dust, obscuring the singularity within. As Foundation scientists work rapidly to fix the array, odd events begin to occur. The workers hear noises that sound like painful wailing. Over time, the noises evolve into words, and then full sentences. They seem to be originating from the singularity. Using equipment able to penetrate the thick cloud of radioactive gas, the Foundation scientists get a glimpse at the singularity. To their surprise, the singularity has taken on the shape of a human. The scientists work frantically to figure out how the singularity could have formed itself into a humanoid shape. Dr. J. Barton Ramsey is the first to try and make contact with the humanoid within the singularity. He finds that the entity cannot communicate in the traditional sense. The massive gravitational pull of the singularity does not allow sound to escape its void. Instead, the entity manipulates gravity to vibrate the suspension rings of the array itself and create sound waves. The being in the singularity whispers in a metallic voice created by the vibrating of the array's rings and says, "Johannes Ramsey." Dr. Ramsey steps back from the observation window. "How do you know my name?" he asks the entity. The humanoid within the swirling gas cloud identifies itself as having the memories of Calvin Desmet. It is not Desmet per se. The being in the singularity is so much more than one person, but it was somehow created by the accident that had sucked Calvin Desmet into the singularity years before. The entity seems to switch between the mind of Desmet and the vast infinity of the cosmos. The Desmet entity asks for an overseer from the Foundation to be brought in. It has a proposal for the O5 Council. When Dr. Ramsey asks why the entity needs to talk to the overseers, it replies that it wants to offer them a way out. The following day, 051 enters the facility and heads to the observation deck. He looks through the reinforced glass at the swirling cloud of radioactive dust, then glances at the monitor to see the humanoid shape of the singularity within. He presses the microphone button on the console and addresses the entity. "To whom am I speaking?" he asks. For simplicity's sake, the entity tells 05-1 to refer to him as Calvin Desmet. 05-1 makes notes of the events unfolding before him, and then asks about the way out that Calvin had mentioned. The air is still for a moment. Then, Desmet begins to speak through the vibration of the structure once again. He informs 05-1 that what the SCP Foundation is doing by securing and containing anomalous entities around the world is like putting a small band-aid on a much bigger wound. Desmet wants to propose a final solution to all of the Foundation's problems. 05-1 listens intently as the entity unravels the mysteries of where the SCPs have come from.
He explains that the anomalies that the Foundation has worked so hard to secure, contain, and protect the human race from are actually bleeding into their reality from a vast multiverse. The only way to stop the manifestation of anomalies into this universe is to destroy all other realities. The entity that is Calvin Desmond tells O5-1 that he is able to bring about this destruction if they release him from the confines of the array. O5-1 is transfixed by the swirling gas that is promising him and everyone else on Earth salvation. He shakes his head in disbelief. Could this be true? O5-1 turns away from the swirling gas and begins to walk away from the viewing glass. I'll need to think about what you're saying. The structure begins to shake slightly. The voice of Calvin Desmond reverberates off of the array a little louder than before. Choose quickly, Overseer. Although it won't happen for decades, eventually a catastrophic SCP event will wipe out life on this planet. Perhaps not in your lifetime, but it will most certainly happen within the lifetime of your children. We will talk again soon. The vibrations slow and then stop completely. There is an eerie stillness in the observation room as O5-1 walks out. The next day, all staff members located at Area 11 are relocated to other Foundation sites and given amnestics. The O5 Council meets in a large circular room with wood paneling and no windows. O5-1 begins the meeting by telling the others what Calvin Desmond had described about the end of the world. He pauses for what seems like an eternity and tells them of Desmond's offer that he could prevent the end of the world, but at the cost of destroying an infinite number of other realities. This would mean that all the humans and creatures of those realities would be destroyed as well. Was murdering countless other beings worth it to protect their own reality? O5-1 begins to shake. He hasn't slept or eaten anything since his talk with Desmond. He's being torn apart from the inside. O5-3 stands up and addresses the council. He informs everyone in the room that independent teams have concluded research into what the Calvin Desmond entity has claimed, and they found it to be true. The world really would come to an end. Furthermore, the research teams determined that the capabilities of Desmond would in fact allow him to dismantle the other realities. O5-3 insists that the council must vote to allow Desmond to destroy the other realities to ensure that this reality could be saved. They must strike now before the world is overrun. O5-1 continues to shake while O5-3 breathes heavily, sweat pouring down his temples. The rest of the council shifts their gazes from side to side. It is time for a vote. There are 8 ayes to allow Desmond to destroy all other realities and 4 nays against the plan. O5-3 stands up and walks around the room, stopping behind each nay voter and putting a bullet in their head. He stops at the last, O5-9, who pulls out a gun, places it under her own chin, and pulls the trigger. O5-13 abstains from the vote and the measure passes. The remaining overseers will use the Calvin Desmond entity to save their reality at the expense of all others, and they soon head to Area 11 to execute their plan. O5-1, 4, and 12 enter the observation room that looks upon the swirling radioactive gas around Calvin Desmond. O5-1 orders NetZac to begin powering down the array, which will allow the entity to prove he can do what he has promised. They have pinpointed the reality that SCP-084 came from, and the shaving mirror itself sits on a table in another room in the facility. O5-3 stands in the room, watching the mirror to see if anything happens. O5-1 asks Calvin Desmond to eliminate the reality that the mirror had come from. The room shakes as the entity uses it to acknowledge the request. Moments later, the phone rings in the observation room. It is O5-3. He informs the others that the mirror has disappeared. Its reality has been destroyed, and therefore, it no longer exists. There is a sigh of relief in the room as the overseers realize that this just might work. O5-1 asks Calvin Desmond to continue and destroy all the realities that are bleeding into their own. This time, the entire facility begins to quake. Suddenly, O5-1 jerks backwards, his eyes wide in confusion and horror. His body seems to be compressing under an unknown force. O5-1 begins to distort. His legs and arms fold into the core of his body. His head snaps down,
and all that was 05-1 is sucked down into a single point in space before it completely disappears. Calvin Desmond then turns his attention to the other two overseers in the room, who both seem to collapse into black holes of their own in the center of their bodies. Netzach's warning klaxon begins to sound, signaling that the emergency failsafe has been activated. Before Calvin Desmond is brought under control, the structural support in the entire facility vibrates with his words. They are in a voice that sounds strangely similar to 051's.
Your children are free to live lives that do not end in horror. An end to your perpetual struggle. An end to darkness. The freedom to live in the light. All traces must be removed. This world must be washed clean. The Foundation does not escape atonement. It is the only way out.
It had been a deception. The Calvin Desmond entity had no intention of stopping anomalies from infiltrating this world. It wanted to remove all traces of the anomalous from all universes, including this one. And that meant destroying the Overseers and the Foundation itself. Their destruction would serve as an atonement for the pain and suffering they had caused in their quest to secure and contain the anomalous. Calvin had to lie to the Overseers about the real plan, since he knew they'd never sacrifice themselves and the Foundation, even if it meant an end to the anomalies plaguing our world. Now though, with the Overseers out of the way, the Calvin Desmond entity is free to move forward with its plan and purge all realities of any trace of the anomalous. But just then, Netzach's failsafes kick in and the Petrichow Fontaine Spatial Stabilization Array subdues the entity's abilities. Desmond is once again contained. 05-3 bursts through the door and into the observation room. He stands before the shattered glass of the window that looks into the array. 053 asks Netzach how long the containment array can hold Calvin Desmond. The computer's voice fades in and out, but says, "Given current conditions, 119 days, 6 hours, and 47 minutes. 05-3 sighs. He tells Netzach to make a note in the SCP database that the Calvin Desmond entity will now be known as SCP-001. Then to make dozens of other randomly generated entries and label them as SCP-001 as well. He knows that they will need to keep the true nature of what this entity can do a secret. 05-3 walks out of the room. Under his breath, he speaks to himself.
They'll say that I'll know the one true God when I see it, and to give that God everything it wants, because that's the only thing that matters. Tonight, it appears God wants to talk to me."
Now go watch the other SCP-001 proposals, The Children and the Church of the Broken God, for more from the most secret and sensitive files in the SCP Foundation's database.